Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Listen to 2 stories at once in this video.
Coming home after a terrifying day, the wife said to her husband. Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy it! The bus was late. Why? This morning it was usually on time, but today it was behind schedule, which worked to my advantage since she wasn't at the bus stop yet. Usually, she was here waiting for the bus at 8 o'clock. According to the schedule, the bus was supposed to arrive at 8:04, but now it was 8:07. I could have, and should have, taken flight 107, which stopped 4 minutes earlier and took a more direct route to school. But for the past few days, I had to wait for flight 104, which went to Birmingham, where I had to catch another bus that would take me to school just in time. Why did I take such a risk? Because of her. She got on Highway 104 and drove into downtown Birmingham, where she worked. I saw a bus come around a bend about 400 yards away, a red giant bus belonging to the Birmingham and Midland Motor Omnibus Company, affectionately known as Midland Red. Now I had no choice. I had to take the bus. Then I saw her walking very quickly. It was unclear whether the bus would get to the stop before she did. That's when the gremlins decided to play for my team. The bus had arrived. These buses were now double-decker, as was common in the British style of the 50s, and also had pneumatic folding doors at the rear, allowing passengers to exit and board. The driver operated the controls, but they were temperamental to say the least. In one of those cases where the doors wouldn't open, we waited, and this waiting gave her time to get to the bus stop. The driver tried the controls a couple of times. You could see the doors shudder, but they did not open. So I stepped forward and pressed the passenger emergency button on the panel next to the door. Bingo! It worked. I stood back and let the other 3 people board the bus, then waited for her to arrive. At last, I received a smile that made any punishment for being late worthwhile. She walked up the stairs, and I followed her. The upper deck was divided into 2 seats with a central aisle. She sat down next to the window, leaving an empty seat next to the gangway. I hovered as if deciding where to sit when she raised her head and shifted slightly, picking up her skirt so that the seat next to her was clear. Then she looked at me. The invitation was obvious. So I sat down. She was a slender girl with blonde hair. Her figure was not curvaceous, with a waist that must have been about 22 or 23 inches, but the skirt she wore flowed beautifully at her hips. Earlier in the morning, I had secretly noticed her bust were good. Even in medium heels, she was a little shorter than me. She was attractive but not striking, the kind of girl you get to know, and with that acquaintance comes the gradual realization that there is a beauty about her that is not immediately apparent. It was smart. She praised me. I didn't know those buttons worked. Well, I just assumed that's what they were here for, I replied. She turned slightly in her seat and looked at me. Which school do you go to? It was obvious that I was still in school uniform. It was mandatory. Hainsworth, I answered. Grammar? Yes. She pushed me further. Yes, 6th grade? Yes. Now you can appreciate my smooth tongue when I talk to girls. I'm Jill with a G. I'm Andrew. Are you usually Andrew, or do your friends call you Andy? Andy. And you speak in sentences with more than one word. She smiled, and I blushed almost as red as the bus was painted. I was saved by the conductor, who wanted to pay for our fare. Jill paid for her travel, and I simply showed him the travel card issued to me by the education authorities. I apologized to Jill. Sorry, but I look a little dumb right now. She smiled. Don't worry. I have little practice communicating with boys. What do you study? Her recognition and understanding helped me finally untie my tongue from the knot it was in, allowing me to speak a little more easily than before. English, language, literature, and art. Are you good at English? She was grinning. Looks like no. Maybe I need more practice. Well, you're getting better. This was the beginning of an emotional journey that I have been on for many years and am still traveling to this day. Some may find it strange that I am tongue-tied. You really have to blame the education system of that era in the UK. After the 11+ examination, Boys and girls who were considered suitable for higher education were assigned to different schools for single-night education. As a result, they emerged into the world with heads full of knowledge in addition to the vital subject of being able to talk to these strange creatures of the opposite intimate. It would be even worse if you continued to prepare for university like I did. Young men, with hormones demanding attention and little knowledge of how to build any kind of relationship with a member of the opposite night, crazy. Here I was, 18 years old and not confident with a girl my age. I looked like I would be comfortable with girls, standing under 6 feet tall with brown hair that, if I let it grow long, would flow back from my forehead in crimson waves. I didn't want that, so I kept it short, almost a buzz cut. I had been thin for most of my life, but eventually, I gained weight quickly. I wouldn't call myself beautiful, others said so, but my face was regular and symmetrical, which meant it never drove anyone away screaming in fear. Now that I had plucked up my courage, I was going to see if I could relate to Jill with a G. After that first false start, Jill and I saw each other every day. In the morning, we would go to Birmingham together, and in the evening, I would wait until she left work. Jill's father had died 2 years before we met. Typically, British companies of the time did not provide life insurance, and the government paid only a meager pension to widows. So, despite her above-average intelligence, Jill had to drop out of school and find a job to cover family expenses. She worked for the Internal Revenue Service doing routine clerical work that in no way challenged her intellect. From time to time, we went to the cinema, but there were always problems with money. Most of her salary was needed at home, and I, of course, did not earn anything since I was busy studying all the time. During the holidays, I worked part-time, taking jobs in the postal service at Christmas and in various shops at other times, so Jill and I could enjoy all the free activities like walking in the countryside and sitting in the park watching people. We amused ourselves by making up fantastic stories about those we saw there. These fantasies were not malicious, although I suspected that the stories we created would not have entertained those who were the subjects of them. Yes, there was one more entertainment that cost nothing. In those days, girls usually went on their honeymoon being innocent. The pill was available, but a girl needed her parents' permission to get the prescription. And how many did? Very few young people my age had the courage to go to the pharmacy to buy protective equipment, so intimate wasn't on the menu. I tried, of course. We spent many happy hours kissing and hugging, but beyond that, Jill had no intention of allowing any further intimacy. Eventually, the time came when I left to study at university. Jill and I both cried at the thought of this separation, and for a while, I thought about not leaving. My parents were adamant that I should go, and Jill, who could easily have found a place at university if not for family reasons, agreed with them. With sadness, I packed the clothes and books I needed for the first semester. I had been accepted into Cambridge, and there was almost no chance of seeing Jill for the rest of the semester. I think my longing for Jill, loneliness without my family, and the new environment were the reasons for my inability to adjust. In the first semester, I came home for Christmas, determined not to return with naive hopes. Jill, although happy to see me, did not want to hear about my refusal. We talked for a long time, and in the end, she convinced me. It also helped that she allowed me greater intimacy than before. I convinced myself that another semester would give me even more of her love. We exchanged letters every week. This was painful for me because, although I studied English and literature, I could not express in writing what I felt. So, my emails were mostly about what I was doing and studying that week. Her letters were chatty, describing everything that was happening while always expressing her loneliness without me and how she was looking forward to our meeting. I was now used to Cambridge, settled in, and began to enjoy my studies, but I was looking forward to spring break, hoping that Jill would allow me even more. The inspired expectation turned out to be deceptive. Jill wouldn't allow more than at Christmas. She apparently had an iron will. She had her limits, and I had to respect them. Andy, I want to do all this with you, but think about how it will be better when we get married. We can go to bed on our wedding night, and I will be all for you. Then we will have everything we want without shame, she said. Great, I thought, but this won't help me now. I had no doubt that I loved Jill and that she loved me. The tears when we parted for me to return to Cambridge were undoubtedly sincere, just as the way she clung to me, knowing I had to go, extracting the last moments of contact before I boarded the train. Our partings were painful, and our meetings were enthusiastic. Neither of us doubted that we would get married as soon as I received my degree. However, 3 years at Cambridge left a heavy mark. This was the third Christmas I came to see Jill. She had become very ill and lay in bed. Her mom was just leaving and asked me to make Jill a hot lemon drink. I went upstairs and knocked on her door. I knew which room she slept in, but I had never gone inside. "Come in, Andy." "I'm decently dressed," she said. It was a disappointment. I opened the door and entered. Jill was sitting in bed, dressed in her nightgown. I knew she had done it on purpose when she let her arms fall to her sides, revealing the view. The nightgown was translucent. She smiled at me, a smile of welcome and uncertainty. Regardless of the cold, I needed to kiss her. I placed the drink on the bedside table and sat down, leaning over to hug her. "Jill, you are so beautiful," I said. She smiled happily, knowing that I liked her body. I understood what Jill was offering me. Years of painful passion pushed me to explore it, but love asked a different question. I knew that Jill wanted to come to the marriage bed as an innocent. If I loved her, how could I not let her give this gift? I also knew that I would hate myself for it later, but I had no choice. I leaned over and kissed her. She smelled amazing. Then I pulled the bedding up to cover her. "Jill, I love you. I love you so much that I want what you want. We will both come to our marriage bed innocent. Believe me, it hurts me not to take advantage of this opportunity now, but you've made it clear all these years what you want. I'll graduate in 6 months. We've waited 4 years. Can't we wait a few more months instead of worrying?" A calm, loving smile appeared on Jill's face. "Thank you, Andy. I would do this for you, you know, but I'm so glad that you also think we should wait," she said, then smiled a mysterious smile of playfulness. I left feeling very good about my noble decision. 2 days later, I became very ill. So much for righteousness. The next few months flew by as I studied from morning to night, preparing for final exams that were getting closer and closer. In August, I returned home with a Bachelor of Arts degree, magna cum laude. All degrees are supposed to be the same, but adding a Cambridge or an Oxford designation after them added luster to them. The first step was to find a job, and I was lucky. I was accepted into the advertising agency August Associates. Most UK companies had what they called a propaganda department, responsible for advertising such as billboards, posters on buses, and signs at railway stations and the like. But with the advent of television, advertising required a more professional approach. Borrowing knowledge and experience from the US, several creative people had created agencies specializing in the production of television commercials. I knew full well that my tutors at Cambridge would have been horrified to learn that this honors graduate had sold out to the greedy mammon, but I was getting married and needed a decent income to secure a mortgage to buy a house. My father provided the deposit, and within 3 months, I was the proud owner of a 3-bedroom semi-detached house on the better side of Eddington. Jill was fully involved in the selection and purchasing process, and her salary was also taken into account when calculating the mortgage. We got married in October. It was a church wedding. Jill was a strong believer but modest. Mrs. Walton, her mother, couldn't afford a big wedding, and Jill didn't want my father to pay for it since he had already put down a deposit on our house. After the church, we went to a restaurant, La Reserve, in Sutton Park, and later, Jill and I snuck away in a hired car to Kingsbridge in Devon for our honeymoon. As I unpacked my suitcase, Jill joked and pulled out the pajamas I had brought. "Do you really think you'll wear that?" she asked with a smile. I smiled awkwardly. I wasn't going to take it, but when I was packing my suitcase, my mother insisted I shouldn't forget it, and I didn't have the courage to tell her it wouldn't be needed. Jill laughed. "What does she think we'll do?" "Well, I know what I'll do," I said, hugging Jill. She looked at me with shining eyes. We made love. It's a wonderful feeling, knowing that there is this beautiful woman waiting for you at home, your wife, who returns home an hour early, cooks a delicious dinner, and who will later happily be without clothes in the bed you share. From the very beginning, Jill insisted that we go to bed without anything. This was the feeling I had every weekday night, and on weekends, there was time for extra love. Jill and I weren't shy about talking about our intimate life. She was open about what she liked and asked what I liked. She was ready to try anything. That's how we were. We talked about everything and tried what we thought was good. There were no restrictions in our bed. Openness and honesty went hand in hand with trust, her trust that I wouldn't hurt her, and my trust that she would always be there. For the next 6 years, our marriage was wonderful. Jill then stopped taking the pills because we decided together that it was time to have a baby. We began the process of conceiving with enthusiasm. Then, one day, Jill said something that may be naive, but we had never used such words in our intimate moments. I think this would be a tremendous motivator for many couples, but not for me. Call us naive, but we had never used such words in our lovemaking. I tried not to think about it. She must have heard it in the office. I knew enough from the girls in my office to know that they could discuss all sorts of things, and often the topic of intimate was present in their conversations. Little did I know that this was a distant harbinger of an impending storm. 2 days before, Jill was at a Christmas party in her office. She returned home around 10:30, happy but perhaps a little tipsy. She kissed me when we met, and I thought that tonight we would have a night of unrestrained love. Not so. As soon as Jill got into bed, she fell asleep immediately. I smiled lovingly as I covered her with the blanket and went to bed myself, thinking that she would have a hangover the next morning. The following week, there was a Christmas party at my office. I'm ashamed to admit that I, too, found myself incapable of lovemaking when I returned home, and the headache the next morning was such that I vowed never to drink again. With holiday visits to parents and relatives, the incident with Jill's rude word was forgotten. This memory loss came back with a vengeance in the new year. Rarely did I have to travel to clients, but in this case, the client wanted part of the advertisement filmed in his office, involving his employees. We usually used sets and actors, but he insisted on filming on his premises. I wasn't thrilled about it, but the customer is always right, so I agreed. His office was in the same building as Jill's. I didn't intend to see her during the visit. I was working, and she was working, so any contact would have been unprofessional. I arrived for the meeting and was pleasantly surprised that Mr. Williams's office and employees turned out to be quite suitable for filming. He was pleased and accompanied me to the first floor, where we waited for the elevator. A signal announced its arrival, and we turned toward the opening doors. There was a man and a woman kissing in the elevator. With surprising indifference, the man reached out and pressed the button to close the doors, continuing to kiss the woman. We were left standing in the foyer, stunned. This damn man. No woman is safe from him, Mr. Williams said angrily as he closed the doors on us. I remained silent because I was in shock. The woman was my wife, my beloved Jill, and she was kissing another man. The drive back to the office was a blur, and even there, I was useless for the rest of the day. Not a single document that landed on my desk was read. The black symbols became hieroglyphs for me, illegible and incomprehensible. All I saw was the elevator doors opening and Jill kissing another man. The scene repeated over and over, as if with each repetition, the characters might suddenly change, and it would not be my wife in his arms. It didn't happen. No, it didn't happen, but it happened. I told my colleagues that I wasn't feeling well and went home. I must have looked like a spectacle on the bus because tears were streaming down my face. Men do not cry. Oh yes, they do, and this man definitely cried. At home, I made myself some tea but didn't drink a sip. I sat in the living room, indulging in sad thoughts full of pain. All my ideas about fidelity and love collapsed. I was cold and curled up on the couch, hugging myself to keep warm. The tea grew cold, not a single sip was drunk. Dusk engulfed the room, as did my hopes and dreams. At some point, I suddenly remembered Jill's words that I had put aside and forgotten. I knew then that it wasn't just about the kiss, no matter how painful it was. Jill allowed him her body. There was no proof, but I knew. I found Jill still curled up on the couch when she returned home. Her anxiety was palpable. "Andy, what's happened?" "You're sick." "I'll call the doctor," she said, picking up the phone. "No, don't." I called. "No need," I replied. Jill hung up and approached me, concern on her face. "What happened, Andy?" she asked. I only knew one way: we had always been frank with each other. When were you going to tell me about Mr. Pearman? For a moment, I saw guilt on her face, but it quickly disappeared. Oh, John? We just work together, that's all. He's a bit of a friend, I guess, a little friend. Do you usually open your mouth for kisses with men whom you call a little friend? Jill shook her head, saying nothing. I continued, and the elevator? Is that a common place to meet with a little friend? Jill stood up and sat on another chair. How did you know about this? She asked, unsure of how much I knew and not confident in herself or me. I removed her doubts. I was in your building today meeting with a client. We were waiting for the elevator, the doors opened, and what a surprise. My wife is kissing another man. I took a deep breath to calm down. I believe it was he who taught you to say what you once said to me at night. Her tears appeared then, and I was glad, at least I was not the only one crying. That day, I went to the kitchen to get a tissue for her, then went upstairs to wash my face. When I returned 10 minutes later, her tears had dried, but it was obvious that, with a little effort, they would flow again. You have nothing to say? I asked calmly. Jill shook her head. I'm sorry, you slept with him, didn't you? She nodded and said quietly, yes. Jill's tears dried up, but mine continued to flow slowly down my cheeks. Her confirmation of what I suspected simply destroyed me. She saw my pain and stood up as if she was going to come to me. I shook my head. Leave. She nodded sadly and put on her coat. At the door, she turned. Andy, I'm so sorry. She left, and my life went with her. Half an hour later, I felt terrible. Jill only had the clothes she was wearing that day in her bag. She had little money, usually only what she took with her for travel and lunch. I was in a panic. How could this pain exist next to compassion? Where would she go? How would she get there? I called her mother but didn't want to say what was going on, so I just said we had an argument and she would see Jill soon. Mrs. Walton laughed. I was wondering when you two would fight. Don't worry, Andy. It's normal. I'll tell her you called when she comes. I thought her mother might change her mind when and if Jill came. I couldn't stay in the house that evening, so I went to my parents' house. My mom was of the same opinion as Jill's mom, but privately I told my dad what really happened. He thought for a moment and said, "Give me some time to think about it, son. Let's spend the night and discuss it in the morning." He apparently told Mom because she looked gloomy at breakfast the next morning. Her advice was unambiguous: if she cheats once, she'll do it again. Andy, go to a lawyer and start divorce proceedings. This was from my mother, who was categorically against divorce but also categorically against infidelity. My father suggested caution. You should talk to her. Find out if it was a one-time mistake or an affair. He and Mom started arguing about their seemingly opposing positions. I made a decision. Mother, Father, I love her so much, but she hurt me more than I thought possible. I don't know if I can forget this pain, but I think I should talk to her to see if anything can be salvaged. Bold words, perhaps, but events had already made this impossible. I called my boss and asked for family leave. Despite my doubts, I had to tell him the truth. He was truly sympathetic and gave me 3 days off at the expense of my vacation. I returned home the next day, hoping Jill would be there. I might not have spoken politely to her, but even her coming home would have told me there was a chance to repair our marriage. She wasn't there. The next day, her mother called. Andy, I'm worried about her. She didn't come to me. I called her old friends, and they hadn't seen her either. I don't know what to do, she said. I thought for a moment. I'll call her office. They don't like personal calls, but at least I'll know she's okay. That's a good idea. Let me know what you find out. Andy, yes, Mom. I'll call you as soon as I find out. The civil service was known for its secrecy, except when it came to state secrets. The office manager, Mr. Grumman, only told me that Jill had taken sick leave from the previous day. He didn't want to comment further until I asked him if Mr. Perlman was working. Why do you want to know? He asked. I think Mr. Perlman and my wife are behaving inappropriately. I cannot comment on office rumors, but he's not at work today. I knew it, he knew about this affair. Mr. Grumman, could you find out what happened to my wife and where she is? I'm asking not for myself, but for her mother, who is very worried. I gave him Jill's mother's phone number. I'll try to find out something, but it's very informal. When I returned from work a few days later, Jill was home. Most of her clothes were gone, along with her makeup and toiletries. She left a small note on the table. All it said was, "I'm sorry. I love you." Yes, I thought you loved me, but if you had waited for me, we could have talked. Mr. Grumman found Jill when he called Perlman's apartment. He didn't want to tell me, but Jill asked him to inform her mother, and of course, her mother told me. Andy, what's going on? Why is Jill in this man's apartment? I told her the simple facts. There was no point in softening the news. I'm so sorry, Andy. What would make my daughter do this? Now it's clear why she didn't come to me. She knew my views on infidelity. Oh, I could strangle her. I'm so angry at her. What was she thinking? She had you. She loved you, and you loved her. What's going on in her head? Andy, what are you going to do? I was going to talk to Jill to see if we could save our marriage, but I'm afraid that this is no longer possible. She took her clothes and went to him. It's obvious that she has more feelings for him than for me. I'll go to a lawyer and start a divorce. I hung up because my pain overwhelmed me, and tears made speech impossible. The divorce went smoothly. I took my lawyer's advice and used misconduct as a basis. If I had tried to get a divorce on the grounds of infidelity, Jill would probably have fought it, and since I had no evidence other than Jill's confession and no witnesses, it would have been a long and difficult fight. She continued to live in his apartment throughout this time, so I believed that Jill was lost to me forever. I came to terms with this but did not find an answer to the question, why? What did I do wrong? I didn't know it then, but this thought would haunt me and interfere with other relationships. Life felt empty now. 6 months ago, it was full of certainties. The love I felt for Jill, the love she felt for me, the wonderful prospect of our life together stretching far into the future, and plans to start a family. All of it disappeared, except for one thing, the love I felt for Jill. Despite what happened, despite my divorce from her, I still loved her. Why? Why couldn't I take a knife and cut it out of me, like a surgeon removes a tumor? Perhaps because we grew up together. From the age of 17 until now, we spent 11 years together, thinking, planning, and talking, always talking. I knew Jill as I knew myself, and she knew me. That is why, when I asked her if she had an intimate relationship with Perlman, she told the truth. I would know if she was lying. I knew Jill, lying would be the ultimate disrespect, and she wouldn't do it. Maybe it meant that she still had respect for me. I don't know, and that's the crux of my problem. I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know why she was intimate with this man. I don't know why she couldn't tell me what was wrong in our relationship. I don't know why she immediately went to him. There was so much I didn't understand, both in her actions and in mine, but I still loved her. I cried. I had recovered enough from the injury to perform well. Proof of this was an invitation to lunch from one of the partners. Alex Wellman had been in the business for some time and understood their attitude towards advertising. He brought this knowledge back to the UK and founded an agency called Wellman Goff & Company. No one knew who Goff was. I arrived at the Penn's Hall Hotel, where he was staying and where our lunch was scheduled. I informed the reception of my arrival, and they called him. Andy, he came up to me with a smile and an outstretched hand. I'm glad to see you. Let's go have a drink before dinner. Thank you, Mr. Willman. Hey, don't bother with this, Mr. Willman, call me Alex. We had a drink in the bar and then went to a great lunch. Our conversation was casual until we got the coffee. Andy, I know about your personal problem, but I hope that it is behind you. I admitted that it was. Fine. We like your work, some of your lyrics are simply sensational. They hit hard but very subtly, fantastic. Now we want you to take the next step and join us in London, working on national projects. There are changes coming in TV advertising. We are planning to create a series that will promote a product but also tell a story to attract viewers. Essentially, we will create drama that will entertain and sell, so we'll need the best dialogue written by the best writer we have, and that's you, Andy. What do you think? My mind was buzzing with possibilities. I thought not just about work, but about leaving Birmingham and forgetting the memories, starting anew somewhere else. The work was secondary. I like this idea. Alex, is this a firm offer? Yes, Andy. We want you here. You will receive a significant promotion, a bonus for working in London, and we will pay all the legal costs of the move. What do you say? It sounds good. What salary can I expect? He took out a piece of paper, wrote a number, and showed it to me. I was shocked for a moment. It was a lot. Did you make a mistake with the comma? I asked jokingly. Alex laughed. That's exactly why we want you. It's a passing comment that asks a question but contains humor and conveys in a second what others would take a minute to say. Yes, the comma is in the right place. Do a good job for us, and I'll move the comma in the right direction for you. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? I shook his hand. Yes, Alex. You have a playwright. I put the house up for sale, packed everything I wanted to take, and moved to London within a month. The office was close to Fleet Street, which was symbolic, as contact with the press was important in the advertising industry. Some might say that the two biggest fantasy industries are in one place. Alex arranged a hotel room for me just off Baywater Road. The company paid for accommodation for 3 months, after which I would have to pay myself. The house in Erdington sold pretty quickly. I offered my father a deposit, which he paid for us, but he categorically refused. So, I wrote a check for half the profits and sent it to Jill through my lawyer. It wasn't part of the agreement, but it made me feel better and was a subtle way of reminding Jill that I was still thinking about her. I spent the next weekend looking for a home in a housing market that seemed to be picking up steam. I wanted to buy in an area that was calm for now but could get hot in a few years. This meant East London, not the city or central areas, but further out into Essex, outside the social development of the 30s. I found a suitable house in Upminster, a 3-room apartment adjacent to another in need of renovation and priced accordingly. Upminster was ideal for me, as the District Tube line ran from there to Temple Station, just a few minutes' walk from the office. The trip took about 40 minutes. My salary easily provided me with a mortgage, and I also got a bank loan to renovate my house. I installed central heating and built an extension over the garage, effectively turning it into a 4-bedroom house. London was an amazing place compared to Birmingham. The most obvious difference was that in Birmingham, life stopped at 10:30 at night. Buses stopped running, with the exception of night flights, which mostly ran every hour. Cinemas closed at 10:15, presumably so their patrons could catch the last regular bus home. Pubs closed at 10:30, there were no nightclubs. The smoke, as London was often affectionately called, sometimes with contempt, was completely different. Life didn't begin until 10:30. Walk the streets at this time, and they are almost as full as during rush hour, but with people, young and old, enjoying life. It took a while to get used to it, but since I worked a lot after hours, I could see the city at any time of day. Once I got settled in, I started going out a little. Theater, opera, and ballet were my attractions. I invited some pretty girls to accompany me, only to find that there's little pleasure in being with someone who doesn't share your interests. These were usually aspiring actresses looking for commercial work while they waited for their big break. Sitting in the stalls at the ballet with a lady who wasn't a good enough actress to hide her yawns of boredom emphasized the connection I had with Jill. We often went to Stratford-upon-Avon to the Memorial Theatre. Jill and I watched a fascinating performance, and during the intermission, we were so full of impressions that the bells signaling the start of the second half rang before we had time to drink our coffee. After evenings in London, I returned home with sadness and regret for what I had lost. I no longer had my other half to talk to. My work was going well. I enjoyed creating something with these commercials instead of just coming up with witty lines for 5-second spots. 3 and then 4 years passed so quickly that I was barely aware of how I was becoming accustomed to the structure of the agency, becoming one of the pillars that held it together. I was reminded of this when I suddenly received an email from a recruiting agency. They were real headhunters, and I was selected as a suitable candidate for a competing advertising agency. I went to a meeting to see what they had to offer, and they put the offer in writing the next day. I asked Alex's secretary to arrange a meeting. I didn't mean to blackmail him, my motives were honest, although I later realized that he didn't think so. I put the correspondence in front of him so he could see that I hadn't initiated it. He read it carefully. "Okay, Andy, are you submitting your resignation?" "No, Alex. I just wanted you to know what's going on. I'm happy here. I like my job. I wanted you to know that I wasn't looking for this offer." I think he couldn't believe what I just did. I showed honesty and loyalty, which he didn't seem to value. "Andy, I can't live up to this offer. I want you to stay with us. You are doing a great job here, so I'll give you a raise of $7,500. If you sign a contract with us for the next 4 years, you will still receive bonuses. But since we will be paying you significantly above the rate for your position, I cannot justify any interim increases during this period. What do you say? Yes or no?" I extended my hand. Yes. Call it naivete, but I took the deal. Even after 4 years of working here, I was still making comparisons based on Birmingham's salary rates. I thought I was paid well, I easily managed my mortgage and no longer went out to enjoy the temptations of the metropolis, with the exception of concerts, which I now attended alone. Glamorous girls who had little interest in their dates other than expensive restaurants where he could take them bored me. I was quite happy with fish and chips after a night at the opera or an inexpensive Chinese meal before listening to the London Philharmonic Orchestra perform Beethoven. This suited me, except that I wanted the seat next to me to be occupied by Jill. I had actually had an intim twice with women. The girls from the office were recommended to me as reliable. Well, they were no match for Jill. My promotion gave me enough surplus income to buy a car. I learned to drive when I was 17. Dad paid for my lessons. It was something like a bribe so that I would continue to study. One of the most attractive cars at the time was the Ford Cortina, and the top-of-the-line model was the 1600E. It had a nice finish, two-tone paint, excellent performance, and wide tires, exactly what a young man with income needed. I used it on weekends, driving around most of Essex and East Anglia. I also drove back to Birmingham to see my parents. The car was good on the motorway and easily reached 105 miles an hour, although this was not recommended. There was no speed limit back then, but there were too many drivers unaccustomed to long trips at relatively high speeds, and frankly, I had to count myself among them. Most people would assume that I had a good life, a well-paid job, my own home, a car, and a relatively carefree lifestyle. But I often asked myself the question, why am I doing all this? For myself or for some young lady who will one day come into my life, and I will find the connection and love that I had with Jill. I longed for it and dreamed about it, but in reality, I knew it wouldn't happen. Even 8 years after our divorce, I couldn't get her out of my system. Any woman I got involved with was inevitably compared to Jill, and I knew she couldn't top her. I hated myself for these feelings. I hated her for making me feel this way. I constantly told myself that everything was over. Forget her, I'd say, only to wake up the next morning and realize that she still held my heart just as tightly as she did on our wedding day. My 4-year contract had expired, and I was waiting for a call from Alex to renew it. Days passed, then weeks, and still no word. I kept working on what we were doing. We were preparing an advertising campaign for a new chocolate bar. They asked us to do a series that would run for 6 months. Each ad lasted 15 seconds and was repeated for 4 weeks before the next one in the series was released. It was a challenge, but really interesting as different ideas came up to be considered. I led the creative team responsible for the dialogue. When the layout was ready, Alex approved it, then the client approved it, and filming began for the entire series of commercials, which were done in 10 days. The first video aired, and I noticed that there were some slight changes in the dialogue that I hadn't written. They were insignificant but influenced the impact. I assumed these changes were requested by the client. A month later, serious faces appeared. The ad didn't work. After 2 months, it was a failure. The point of sale was not working. Advertising stands at supermarket checkouts, for which the supplier had paid dearly, did not attract buyers. After 3 months, the remainder of the campaign was canceled. That's when I received a call to Alex's office. A scapegoat was needed, and I became it. I was paid 3 months' salary as compensation. I packed my things and left the office by 11 in the morning. Lesson learned: trust few. I would become a pariah in the London advertising industry. For a while, I thought I had little choice but to return to Birmingham and try to find freelance work there. There was always suspicion in Birmingham circles about London practices and ideas. Someone who disgraced himself in London couldn't be all bad, according to Birmingham people. Londoners called it envy, Birmingham folks called it common sense or insight. The silver lining to the dark cloud was a phenomenon called the housing boom. Properties within easy reach of London were in demand. I put my house on the market and was inundated with offers. I accepted the first good offer and couldn't believe how much the price had skyrocketed. Then the agent came back and said he had another offer, £10,000 more than the first. I said no, I had already accepted the first offer. He couldn't believe it. His idea was to squeeze everything he could out of it, promising that in a week they would offer me even more. I was raised to believe that a man's word is his bond. I refused all subsequent offers and stayed with the first one. I had to sleep at night. Another lesson: honesty costs money. Even after paying off the mortgage, I still had almost £100,000 in capital. I returned to Birmingham in the early spring, staying with my parents and starting to look for work. I jotted down a resume and took it to an office where they printed it and made 20 copies. The woman who ran the office called me as I was about to leave. "Mr. Gresham, can I talk to you?" I nodded and walked up to her. She invited me into her office, offered me coffee, and got down to business. "Mr. Gresham, I couldn't help but notice your resume. I have rarely seen such a laconic and attractive positive response. I believe your honors degree from Cambridge explains this." I thanked her for the compliment and waited for what she would say next. "Much of what we do is work for small companies. This is usually a simple typewritten affair, but some are starting to place small advertisements in local newspapers. These are small businesses and self-employed people who don't have the knowledge or experience to put together an ad and make it interesting enough to grab people's attention." I knew exactly what she was talking about. I had seen those small advertisements in the newspapers and could immediately tell that they had little chance of success. I agreed with her and said so, but since she had not introduced herself yet, I did not know her name. "Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm Mrs. Holden." "Ruth Holden," she said, embarrassed at her mistake. "I was wondering, Mr. Gresham, if you could look at some of these advertisements as they come in and, shall we say, give them a professional polish?" I could do it, but as you can see, I'm looking for a job in the advertising industry, and I doubt I'll have time for it. "Yes, of course," she replied. "I understand, but I would be willing to pay you. I could offer clients a service for a small additional fee. I'm sure most of them would be happy if their ads looked professional. Let me think about it, Mrs. Holden. I will contact you soon with my decision." I spent the rest of the day sending my resume to agencies I knew, the ones that had no connection to Wellman. I considered Mrs. Holden's proposal and rejected it. She wanted more profit from her typewriting work without additional costs. I, on the other hand, could do the job quickly, but I was sure that Mrs. Holden would not want to pay me professional rates. My dad asked me if I wanted to stroll down to the Horse and Jockey for a pint that evening. I was glad of this, and after dinner, we slowly walked along the road to the crossroads where the pub was located. I froze for a moment as the bus stop where I first saw Jill was only 50 yards down the main road. Memories came flooding back to me. At first, I thought that my father had some ulterior motive for this proposal, but no, he just wanted a calm and friendly drink. That's exactly what we were doing until suddenly someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Andy! What are you doing here? We all thought you were in London, living life to the fullest." It was Barry Mason, one of our company colleagues whom I had known when Jill and I were together. "Barry! I'm glad to see you. What have you been up to lately?" My father intervened, saying he was going to chat with a friend, explaining, "Roger beat me by 5 at golf last week. We need to negotiate a rematch and get that back." Not for long, I turned to Barry, and we began exchanging news. During the conversation, he expressed surprise at the divorce. None of us could understand it. Andy, you and Jill were so perfect for each other. That's what I thought, but Jill found this guy and went to him. End of story. Barry shook his head. From what I heard, she doesn't live with him. Must live? No, Andy, I'm sure about that. According to Becky, she never lived with anyone after your divorce. It was amazing. Her boss at the tax office confirmed that she was there with Perelman. She answered all letters from my lawyer from his address. She didn't hire her own lawyer, clearly admitting her guilt and accepting her fate. I still had copies of the correspondence. Becky was Barry's wife, and although she did not work in the tax office, she was an accountant and often interacted with Jill and her colleagues. I decided not to continue this conversation but was determined to go and find out for myself. On Saturday afternoon, maybe this would finally kill the pain inside of me. Around 3:30, I drove to Stanford, found the address, and was immediately disappointed. It was a Victorian house converted into apartments. The paint on the woodwork was peeling, and the front garden was full of overflowing rubbish bins, with small patches of grass bravely pushing through the debris. The glass in the windows was dirty and smeared. Does Jill live here? The only consolation was the intercom system for 4 apartments. I pressed the button for apartment number 3. There was no answer, so I pressed again. Suddenly, there was a click from the speaker, and an impersonal voice asked, "Who are you looking for?" I wanted to call apartment 3. "I'm looking for Jill." "Oh, Jill Graham? She's gone. I saw her leave about an hour ago. She probably went shopping. She should be back soon." Click. The woman cut off. I returned to the car, undecided whether to wait or not. Give me half an hour, I told myself. Then it dawned on me, she still uses my last name. Of course, there was no need to revert to a maiden name after a divorce, but I was sure that Jill would be Mrs. Pearman by then. Thoughts raced through my head. I waited half an hour and then decided to wait another half hour. There was a dilemma, and if possible, I wanted to solve it. 10 minutes later, I saw her in the distance. She was too far away to know for sure, but my senses told me it was her. She was holding the hand of a small child. As she came closer, I saw her posture, full of fatigue, melancholy, sadness, and defeat. My heart sank. I hadn't gotten out of the car yet, but she looked up and fixed her gaze on the car as if she knew there was something there for her. She walked closer without taking her eyes off the car. I got out. She looked shocked at first, then gave me a faint smile. "Hello, Andy." "Jill, how are you?" I shook my head. There was no need to answer. She knew exactly how she looked. "Why are you here? Have you come to gloat?" "No, Jill, you should know better than that." Her bitterness overpowered her natural kindness. "Yes, I know." Sorry for those words. There was understanding and sympathy in her eyes. "This is Anita." The little girl stood beside her, watching our conversation with a serious expression on her face. "Anita, it's Andy." She stopped and started again. "He was a friend from my youth." Anita smiled. "Hello, Mr. Andy." "Hello, Anita. How old are you?" What else should I tell the child? Their age is very important to them. I am 8. I'll be 9 in September. Jill interrupted her before Anita could say more. "Well, since you came from afar, would you like some tea?" "That would be nice. It's not that far from Sutton to Stanford." Anita led us upstairs. Jill followed, and I brought up the rear. I picked up one of Jill's bags as we walked through the door, and she turned. For a moment, I saw a flash of emotion. Her apartment was on the first floor, the exact opposite of the rest of the building. It was clean, brightly painted, although not professionally, and free of the old house smell that lingered in the common areas. Jill disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard her fill the kettle. Anita took off her coat and carried it past the kitchen into what I assumed was her bedroom. She was definitely Jill's daughter. Jill always hung up her coat right away. When Jill returned, she motioned for me to sit down. She sat in a chair with wings, covered with a bright blanket. "Well, Andy, you see where I am and what condition I'm in." I know you're not the type to be happy about this, but why did you come? I have lived with so many unanswered questions all these years. I wanted to see you so I could finally put this pain to rest and try to rebuild my life. Jill looked sad. Yes, I hurt you and hurt myself in the process. I'm sorry, Andy. Her face brightened a little. I thought you succeeded. You went to London and, according to rumors, found an excellent job. Could you come back just to meet me? No, Jill. I really had a great job, but I was fired. The surprise on her face was obvious. Fired? Yes. The campaign failed, and apparently I was the reason. She looked doubtful. No, Andy. I watched a lot of TV, that's all I have for entertainment. I could see the commercials you had a hand in. There was always something special about them, clear and capacious. I've recognized your style since you worked in Birmingham at August. Your style is very distinctive. Well, whatever it was, I was fired. Now I'm back in Birmingham. The kettle began to whistle, and Jill went to make tea. When she returned, she looked different, stronger and more determined. She gave me a cup and returned to her chair. I should thank you for that check, she looked at me. I was damn angry at first. It was your way of reminding me that I left a good man behind. I thought about returning it, but to be honest, I needed the money. Later, when I thought about it, I realized that it was just you trying to be as fair as possible. Thank you, Andy. That was a nice gesture. Damn angry? This doesn't sound like the Jill I knew. She smiled for the first time. Life changes your views and vocabulary. Sometimes cursing is the only way to get through the day. I decided to ask a question without asking what I really wanted to know. I don't want to cause you any inconvenience, so I'll drink my tea and leave before Pearman arrives. What time should I expect him? She laughed a short, cynical, and contemptuous laugh. She looked at her watch. He left at 11 o'clock and hasn't been back for 8 years, so I don't expect him anytime soon, between now and when hell freezes over. He left as soon as he found out I was pregnant. I gave up the best man I've ever known for a goat. I saw tears of anguish flow down her cheeks. I felt sorry for her, but I had gotten the answers I was looking for. At that moment, Anita entered the room. Mommy, it's getting cold in my room. Can I turn on the heater? Put on another sweater for a while, honey. I'll turn on the heater later. Anita ran to follow her mother's instructions. Good kid, I said politely, but I didn't expect anything less from my daughter. From this exchange, I understood that Jill's finances were not in the best shape. Do you still work at the tax office? Yes, but only the civil service tolerates my flexibility in my work schedule. Tears flowed again. Andy, you found out what you wanted. Please go away. While you are here, you remind me of another life, a good life, which I deliberately left. I can't bring it back, so please don't tempt me with these visions. I stood up, finished my tea, and was ready to leave when I turned to her, walked over, and took her hands in mine. Jill, I can help if you let me. Forget the pain. I'm still worried about you. Why did I say this? It wasn't my intention, but the words just came out. Really? Tears streamed down her face. No, you cannot, and I don't need your help. Leave. Fine, I'll leave. But Jill, I told you to leave once, and it was a mistake. We needed to talk. You just told me to leave, and now you're the one who's wrong. This time, I won't give up so easily. I closed the door behind me, unlocked the car door, and looked up. Jill was there by the window. I raised my hand in goodbye, and she waved back slightly. I left feeling happier than I had in years. I called Mrs. Holden and told her I could do some work for her. Then I told her how much I would charge per hour. There was a sigh over the phone. So much? Mrs. Holden, I spent 3 years at Cambridge completing my degree and have since worked in advertising for 14 years. Your clients will get ads that work instead of throwing money away on campaigns that don't stand a chance. What's better, paying for professional work or losing money? I could write 6 or 7 ads in an hour, split among your clients, and that would be a small fee for professional work. She said she would think about it and call back. If she had 7 clients who needed my help, that would be good. If there was only one, she had to make a decision to either cover the costs herself or pass them on to the client. Either way, I didn't care. The experience of working with Alex Wellman was a learning experience. Do you need my expertise? You will pay for it. I felt uncomfortable living with my parents. I really needed to get out and start looking for my own place. At first, when I returned, I thought a nice apartment would do, but after meeting and talking with Jill, I was confused. Would an apartment be suitable, or do I really need a house? Perhaps I was in a hurry when I should have walked slowly and carefully, but I couldn't control my emotions. They told me that despite everything that had happened, I wanted Jill back in my life. In one sense, our meeting was not successful. I wanted to find closure, but now I realized that this would not happen. The wound on my heart was open again, and only Jill could heal it. I received a couple of calls inviting me for interviews from 2 agencies to which I sent my resume. They were instructive. As I suspected, what was happening in London was very different from the way of working in Birmingham. I spoke to John Ferguson at Melling Services, the second agency to respond. He knew Alex Wellman and his methods. This man doesn't even know what honor is. You're not the only one he set up. I'm willing to bet your script will appear almost verbatim in another ad. This man is a hyena. Having poured out his bile, he continued to find out if I was suitable for them. I told him about some of the campaigns I had worked on and showed him copies of slogans and scripts. Many of them were familiar to him, and his interest grew more and more. Andy, we've never gone for national campaigns before, but with you on board, we'll have the talent for some really good projects. I can't say welcome aboard right now. I need to know if our leaders are ready to finance such campaigns. Let me contact you in no more than 2 days, I promise, and don't accept any offers until we talk. I can't promise you the package you had in London, but it will be the best you can find here, that's all I can say. I was happy. I had started the process and was now confident that my dismissal would not be a problem. The following Saturday, I waited outside Jill's apartment for her to return from shopping. She didn't welcome me with open arms. Andy, I told you not to come again. It hurts to see you and remember everything from our past. I ignored her words and instead handed Anita the doll I bought. Doesn't every 8-year-old girl love dolls? Perhaps not today, but back then, the answer was yes, and I assumed there weren't many gifts in Anita's life. Anita took the doll with joy, thanking me properly. She then announced that the doll's name was Lou. I looked puzzled until Jill explained that there was a program on TV with a character called Lou. Less irritated, Jill invited me to tea. Why did you come again, Andy? To hurt me? I know I hurt you. Can't you just forgive me or hate me and move on with your life? No, Jill, I can't, I replied. Ever since I was 17, you have been in my life. You supported me, encouraged me, made me laugh, and laughed with me. We shared our interests, even fantasies about people in the park when we didn't have money for anything. A lack of money didn't matter because we had each other. We went to the opera and ballet, saw Shakespeare at the Old Vic, and I was a spectator at the Royal Albert Hall. Once, I even enjoyed the music, singing, and dancing. My heart was reserved for only one person, Jill, only for you. When I came to you last week, I wanted to find that my love was gone and buried, but that didn't happen. Even after all this time, it's still here, and I believe your love is still here too. It may be barely smoldering, but I want to try to rekindle it. Thanks for the tea. I'll stop by again next week. If you tell me to leave, then I will leave, and that will be the end of it. But if you want to be friends again, like before, if you want to see if we can rekindle this little smoldering fire, tell me, and we'll see what we can do. I thought Jill would make a scene, but she smiled. Well, Andy Gresham has become persistent. Yes, now I often press the button to open the bus doors, I replied. Jill giggled. Oh God, remember that? Of course I remember. The doors opened to the best years of my life, I said. I'll be here next week, I added. She nodded, then walked over and asked, will you kiss me? I didn't answer, I just leaned over and kissed her. The shock surprised me. Jill accepted the kiss and looked at me with questions in her eyes that I couldn't answer because she was asking questions of herself. Whatever answers she found, I had no way of knowing. I doubted she knew herself. "Next week," I said. "Next week," she repeated. On Tuesday evening, I already had work lined up. They made me a fair offer. As John Ferguson said, it wasn't on par with what I was getting in London, but it was probably the best I could get. I didn't hear from Mrs. Holden, but that didn't matter. If she needed work, I could do it in an hour or so in the evening. Dad invited me back for drinks at the Horse and Jockey. I had a feeling that this time he was going to interrogate me, and he really started with the first sip of our beer. "Andy, you saw Jill. What's wrong?" He was my father, and he deserved the truth. "Honestly, Dad, I went in thinking I could get rid of the ghost. Jill meant so much to me, and even after the divorce, I still had feelings for her. However, when I saw her, I knew that no matter what happened, I'm still in love with her and would like to try to find some kind of life with her." He nodded slowly and took another sip of his beer before answering. "Son, I know you have a good heart, and I always thought Jill was perfect for you. If you feel that way, try to win her back. This life is much easier with the right woman by your side than with someone who will just fit in." It was nice to know that someone could see the future without all those clouds complicating things. "What do you think Mom will say?" She was pretty adamant about me divorcing Jill. "I'll tell you something, but it won't go anywhere. Promise me." "Yes, sure. When I was in the army in Korea, your mom had a little fling with another guy. I'm sure it didn't go as far as Jill's, but still, it caused a lot of problems. At the time, your mom was so angry at herself, more than I actually was. She was the woman I wanted and needed in my life, not the woman who would just fit in. I guess the realization that I could leave made her so harsh about what Jill did. It's like an ex-smoker becoming the most ardent anti-smoker to others. I bet Jill is just as angry at herself now. Son, that anger will be your problem." The more I thought about my father's words, the more prophetic they seemed. I felt that anger in Jill. It might not be as easy as I thought. The following Saturday, I visited Jill again. I took a new approach. Instead of going for tea, I suggested that Anita go to McDonald's. Jill wanted to object, but Anita's enthusiasm drowned out her protests. We got into the car, Jill in the front and Anita in the back seat, and drove to Solihull, the closest McDonald's to Stanford. Jill looked at me and said quietly, "Cunning." I grinned, and she smiled. We hardly talked about ourselves. Anita was so captivated by the fact that she was in a place she had seen on TV. Of course, it wasn't the same location, since the commercial was filmed in the States, but the layout was similar enough to convince her that this was it. With a mouthful of Big Mac and a box of Diet Pepsi, nothing could ruin Anita's happiness that day. I also got a Big Mac but couldn't eat it all since I had one of my mom's sandwiches for lunch. Jill only ordered coffee, so she took my Big Mac and snacked on it. Suddenly, the memories made her sad. We often shared food together. We returned to the apartment, and Anita immediately went to her room to watch TV. She thanked me very politely, without waiting for a reminder, for taking her out. Yes, Anita thought I was taking her out, and her mom was just an addition. "Andy, I don't know what to say about our conversation last week." "Well, your conversation," I said. "I said very little. There's a part of me that would like to go back to where we were, but there's also a part that says the pain caused is too much to ever go through. I don't want to start this path if we end up with all the pain and blame starting again." I kept my father's words in mind, so I surprised Jill when I said, "So, you don't believe you can forgive yourself?" She really looked shocked. "Andy, I would have thought it was you who needed to forgive me. Except for the day I found out. Have you ever heard anything from me that would indicate that I didn't forgive you? If I hadn't forgiven you, would I still be here?" Jill thought, going over our conversations in her memory. "No, I probably wouldn't have. Have I ever let you know that I don't have feelings for you?" "No, that's right. So, the problem is you not forgiving yourself." Jill had to think about it. I saw understanding come to her face. "You're right. I don't forgive myself. I hate what I did. I hate what I did to you. I was so confused at the time. You know, it was only you, and then John worked with me, and he was friendly. He made the days go by faster, and you know how much I hated that job. We laughed and joked, and it became fun to go to work. Then, at the Christmas party, I relaxed a little and had a few drinks, more glasses of wine than usual. I danced a couple more times than I should have with John, and then he just took me into the office and told me he was going to make love to me. Jill was crying now. He just told me that like I had no choice, and I didn't. I couldn't stop him. I didn't even try. Andy, I didn't try, she wept bitterly. I walked up and put my arm around her shoulders, but she pushed me away. No, don't. I don't deserve comfort. I gave what I promised to you, and only you lying, deceitful idiot. At that moment, Anita returned to the room. Mr. Andy, why are you making Mommy cry? Jill quickly answered her, no, honey. Andy doesn't make me cry, I just remembered something that upset me. Anita seemed relieved by this answer. Well, don't cry, Mom, you have me. She immediately disappeared back to the TV in her room. The inconsistency of her statement and the speed with which she left made me laugh, and soon after, Jill smiled again. Children, she said, if everything is good in their world, they don't worry about others. They learn as they get older. This was my comment on the topic. I decided that this was the moment I should leave. Nothing good would come from putting any more pressure on Jill. However, I learned something more about Mr. Mann, and also that Jill was probably drunk. The state in which she returned home confirmed this. Jill, I'll be back next Saturday. I'll come early, and we'll all go to Cannon Hill Park together. The band is supposed to be playing. Jill accepted this, probably more for Anita's sake than for herself. Anita will enjoy this. She paused. You're not going to give up, are you? It wasn't a question, it was a statement with a hint of doom. No, I am not going. She shook her head. You're crazy. I grinned. Yes, crazy, stupid, illogical, and completely out of my mind. I need a good woman to help me find my sanity. I leaned toward her and kissed her. This time, her hand came up and stroked my cheek. The following Saturday, Jill and Anita were ready when I arrived. Anita chatted happily as she sat in the back seat, telling me all about her school and friends, what she was doing in class, and then non-stop moving on to her favorite TV programs. She fell silent only when something interesting caught her attention outside the window. Jill leaned toward me and said quietly, she told everyone that Mr. Andy was taking her with him on Saturday. I think I'm just going as an escort, I laughed. I parked at Cannon Hill Park, which was opposite the Edgbaston cricket ground. Judging by the number of cars parked there was a match going on. As we walked through the park, it was a kind of show park, well laid out with paved paths that led through the forest and along the River Ray. We walked along the paths, and Anita skipped joyfully, sometimes holding Jill's hand and sometimes holding mine. Jill and I easily fell back into our old habits from when we first started dating, easily talking about things and then watching people, making up fantasies like before. We had to stop this when Anita demanded to know how we knew the people we were talking about. It was hard to explain to an 8-year-old girl that we were just making up these stories. Sometime later, we heard the sound of music wafting through the gentle breeze, telling us that the band had arrived and started playing. We quickly walked to the stage to get a good seat. We found the perfect spot, and since the ground was dry, Jill gracefully sank onto the grass as elegantly as only women can. Her legs were bent back on one side, and her skirt spread out around her. I popped down next to her, and Anita insisted on sitting between us. I have always been a fan of almost all music, although I must say that I do not like pure jazz. Nothing against it, it's just not my type. This group played well, with lots of military marches and some classical pieces for brass bands. Towards the end of their set, they played the Helston Floral Dance. All around us, we could hear people singing along with improvised versions of the words. We sang too, and when I looked at Jill, her face was lighting up as she sang, holding Anita's hand, conducting the orchestra. She seemed to feel my gaze and looked in my direction. There was a happiness in her eyes that had not been seen in the past few weeks, a shine that I don't think had been there for years. I was back at work, taking on a new challenge at mailing services. I got along well with John Ferguson, and we soon began looking at more prestigious companies with national reach. The crowning achievement was that we were invited by a candy bar manufacturer that had failed. Their marketing director, Brian Forster, was a little wary when he realized I was participating and asked me right away, "Why did you change that script?" he demanded. "It was damn good, and then you changed it when it was too late to do anything about it." "I didn't change the script. I assumed you, the customer, asked for the final changes." "No, we didn't ask." He thought for a moment. I wasn't going to say anything because I now realized who changed the script. Why did Wellman do this? I had my own ideas, but now was not the time to voice them. I think Brian came to the same conclusion but had no idea of the undercurrents that inspired these changes. Water under the bridge, perhaps, but it illustrated the treacherous business in which we worked. I had to put together a few ideas for Brian, and obviously, I couldn't use the text I had before. Even with the changes, it would be considered broken material. It took me about a week of intensive vocabulary work, but I was able to submit some proposals for consideration. My cousin Jean came to see her parents this week. She was much older than me, about 50, and was jokingly called the family genealogist. She was rummaging through the attic of the house she inherited from her parents and found an old suitcase full of photographs. She brought with her those that were relevant to our family, and we spent a happy evening passing them around. Yes, there were the usual awkward photos of various family members, including me. Then she took out one photograph of my mother. Mom tried not to let anyone see her. "No, give it here. You can't show it to anyone." "Dad, Jean," and I laughed. Dad took it first and told Mom that he could see how she had grown into a beautiful woman. Then my mother looked at the photograph and, of course, immediately complained that the photographer did not take the photo from the best angle. Then the photo came to me, and I froze. Mom was 11 in this photo, and it was taken 50 years ago, but the girl that mother was then was an exact copy of Anita. Coincidence? Hardly. Anita must be my daughter. I stood up, apologizing to Jean. "I need to talk to someone. I don't know if they noticed that I took the photo with me." I arrived at Jill's apartment not too late in the evening, so I was sure she had not yet gone to bed. I called her apartment, and a few minutes later, her voice asked who it was. There was concern in her voice. "Jill, it's me, Andy." "Andy? What are you doing here at this time?" "I have something important to discuss." "Can I come in, please?" "Can't it wait until Saturday?" "No, Jill. Let me in. I need to talk to you now." The alarm sounded, and I pushed the door open and walked up the stairs. Jill opened the door and peeked around it to make sure it was me before opening the door all the way. "Do you want some tea, or do we need something stronger for this conversation?" "Tea will be fine." She went to the kitchen, and I followed her. Anita said she really enjoyed her day at Cannon Hill Park, and if Mr. Andy would like to go to Alton Towers, "I'm sure it can be arranged," I answered. She turned from making tea. "You really don't have to make that kind of sacrifice." "Why not?" "Any father would do this for his daughter." The kettle froze. Jill stood silent and motionless for a second or two. Without looking up, she said softly, "You guessed it." "Not really. Let's just say I got a big hint when I saw that photo." I handed her a photo of my mother. Jill took it, and her eyes widened. This was taken when Mom was 11. That's quite a coincidence, isn't it? Too much of a coincidence, in fact. It leads to certain conclusions. Jill silently continued making tea, handed me a mug, and we moved into the living room. Obviously, she wasn't going to say anything, so I continued. "When were you going to tell me, Jill? Why didn't you tell me? You could have, through a lawyer, if you couldn't talk to me directly. I would have supported her even if you didn't want me back in your life." I was crying now, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I have a daughter, 8 years old. I wish I could have held her in my arms when she was a baby, but you took that away from me. I wish I could have been there when she took her first steps, said Mama and Dada for the first time, but you deprived me of that too." "Why, Jill? Why?" Jill looked up, full of guilt. She saw my tears and quickly came over and hugged me, adding her tears to mine. My arms wrapped around her, and it took us a while for both of us to calm down. I took out a handkerchief, fortunately, it was clean, and wiped her tears. She then took it and wiped mine. She sat down on the sofa next to me, blew her nose, and took a deep breath. I couldn't tell you, Andy. If I did, it would look like I was trying to blackmail you into letting me come back. I really wanted to come back, but I'd already hurt you enough. I couldn't hurt you anymore. I didn't want to live my life knowing that I was here only because of pity, and every day to see your hatred for me. I sinned against you and against God's commandments. I had to accept my punishment. Jill, it wasn't your decision. Perhaps, but in the state I was in then, I doubt I was thinking logically. Later? Well, it was too late to do anything. It came back to me, the last few weeks, seeing you interact with Anita, how you treat her. Well, not like the illegitimate daughter of a man whom you have every right to hate. I saw this and felt such guilt. Here was a man big enough to show compassion for a child who was innocent of the sins of his mother. I almost told you, but then again, it would seem like an attempt to force you to take me back. You're not forcing me. I want you back. I love you, Jill. I never stopped loving you. I want you back, to where you belong, next to me. Jill was silent, but there was a mixed feeling of hope and doubt in her behavior. You can't be serious. Can I? I came to you all those weeks ago to try to forget you because you've been haunting me all these years. But you're not a ghost, not now. You're a woman, the only woman I've ever loved, and I know I'll never find love like this again. This brought on another round of tears. Through her sobs, she sighed pitifully, but can you forget what I did? No, Jill, but you won't forget either. You explained what happened, and I can understand it. It still hurts when I think about it, but having the choice to have you in my life or let it ruin our lives? I choose you. I now know that you and I are one, we were always meant for each other. I love you. I had something else I wanted to say, something that was only half formed in my mind. Jill, in many ways, we were so naive, you and I. We were raised to understand the concepts of honesty, truth, and loyalty. We lived by those concepts and didn't know that others didn't. We've both learned now that people don't always be what they seem. Baron took advantage of you when you were drunk, and Alex Wellman set me up because he thought I was blackmailing him into giving me a promotion. So if forgiveness is necessary, I forgive. If you forgive. Forgiving is one thing, forgetting is another. No, we won't forget, and we shouldn't, because it will be a reminder to be on guard for the next dishonest man. I've always loved you, Andy. I tried because I made a mistake. I tried to stop loving you, but I couldn't. Then Anita came along, and I found an outlet for all that love. She turned and ran into my arms. Andy, isn't this some kind of game you're playing? You're not going to leave me when you get your revenge. Do you really mean it? With my body, I worship you. I can't remember the rest. Oh yes, the part about all my worldly goods. Men will remember that part, but I'm sure we can do it again. No, my dear Jill, I'm not playing. I love you and want you to become my wife again. There was this face in front of me, it was red from crying, spotty and wet, but with the biggest smile I had ever seen, except for the one that was on our wedding day. If it was a proposal, then the answer is yes. She paused, and a soft look of love appeared in her eyes. Are you staying the night? No, Jill. We're not married. We could make an exception. In the eyes of some priests, we are married. They do not recognize divorce, and I really want to feel your embrace again. I sinned once, but I am sure God will forgive this sin, and it will only be a small sin. You're tempting me. I really want to stay, but my cousin came. She was the one who found the photo, and it would be rude if I didn't come back. Jill nodded. Are you coming over on Saturday, then? I'll make us dinner, and you can stay. It's not about the night, Andy. I just want to be in your arms, in your bed, and feel loved again. Of course I will come, and on Sunday we will all go together to look for a house. A house? A house for us? A sudden thought struck me, Anita knows. No, perhaps we should introduce her to this idea gradually. At 8 years old, She may have a hard time understanding the terrible things adults do to each other. She looked happy, her eyes were shining. Are you sure about the house? I can't help. Yes, you can. When we find our house, just make sure you're there, because without you, it will just be a house. I had to leave, otherwise, I would have problems with my mother. Jill hugged me tightly and offered her lips for a kiss of love. This is all. I'll apologize to Mom, Dad, and Jean in the morning. I can't leave, Jill. Now, can I use your phone? Certainly. I called my dad and told him that something very important had happened and I would come home in the morning to explain everything. Okay, son. I'll calm your mom down. Jill listened to my conversation with increasing joy. I hung up and she took my hand. Let's go to bed, Andy. I need you to hold me. Going to bed was a little more complicated than just going to Jill's bedroom. There was only one bedroom in the apartment and Anita slept in it. Jill threw the cushions off the couch and lifted the seat, pulling it toward her. The result was a 3/4 size bed. Adding pillows and a blanket from the closet, the bed was ready. Jill stood on one side, and I stood on the other. It wasn't seduction, we both realized how important it was. She was the first to remain without anything and slid into bed. She pulled back the covers and raised her arms. You're welcome, Andy. I lay down next to her and hugged her. We didn't have an intimate. Anita was sleeping in the next room, and the possibility of her sudden appearance ruled this out. But we were both aware that it brought us great pleasure and warmth. The light began to break through at 6 o'clock in the morning. Jill was still asleep, holding me tightly, just like when we made love the night before. My movements woke her up, and her first thought was to hug me tighter, strengthening our bond. I kissed her forehead. That wasn't enough for Jill. She raised her mouth, asking me to kiss her. I kissed her. She pulled away and looked at me seriously. No regrets? She asked. None, I assured her. I love you, Jill, with all my heart, mind, and body. She smiled. I love you, Andy. I knew it when I asked you to kiss me last week. The feeling that went through me was amazing. I've loved you since you pressed that button and sat next to me. I lost my way, but you came and found me and led me on the right path. You were my man, my protector, my strength, my lover, and my best friend. I don't deserve you, but you are here, and I will fight to hold you, no matter what it takes. There's a gold ring on that finger. I lifted her left hand and found the third finger. Here's what's needed, and I'll make sure it's there as soon as possible. We were interrupted by Anita, who came into the room unnoticed. Mom, why are you in bed with Mr. Andy? Jill smiled and sat down. Mom, you're not dressed. No, honey. Andy and I love each other, and we're going to get married. When you love someone, you don't have to wear clothes when you go to bed. It's nicer that way. Anita didn't think much about the other aspects of it. Mom was happy, which meant she was happy too. Anita looked at me, and I decided to stay where I was. I didn't want to shock Anita even more. Mr. Andy, does this mean you will be my daddy? I nodded. Yes, Anita, if you like. She giggled. Yes, I'll love it. Does that mean we can go to Alton Towers? Jill laughed. The important things in a child's life are very self-centered. Yes, Anita, I answered, trying to hold back a smile. But there are some rides that little girls can't go on, they're too dangerous. You have to promise not to be upset if Mommy or I say no. Yes, Mr. Andy, I'll be good. She ran off, repeating out loud, I will have a dad, a real dad. The TV in her room immediately turned on. Life is so simple for a child, Jill said. Jill suggested that I get up and get dressed. I enjoyed seeing you without clothes, but I suspect it might shock Anita. I grinned. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for not giving up on me. I had no choice, life was empty without you. An angry mother was waiting for me when I returned home. No matter how old the child is, an angry mother is a force to be reckoned with. Where were you? You just ran away and then called to say you weren't coming back. What was so important that you couldn't be polite to your cousin, let alone Dad and me? I felt humiliated. I told the truth. I was with Jill. Mom's face was a painting of shock. Oh no, Andrew, you're not going to be with her again. It was a question formulated as an instruction, or perhaps an instruction formulated as a question. Yes, Mom, we're going to get married again. I would have thought you would have learned your lesson by now. Have you forgotten what she did? No, Mom, I haven't forgotten, but I could never get her out of my head. I came to her a few weeks ago and realized that I still love her and she still loves me. Humph. She'll say anything to get you back. No, Mom, she didn't want to talk to me at first. I was the one who insisted on it. Then you are a fool. Okay, I'm a fool, but I thought you'd want to meet your granddaughter. Dad entered the room at that moment. Granddaughter? You said granddaughter. Yes, Dad, I have a daughter, and she is 8 years old. Mom was still skeptical. Oh, she's cunning. First, she convinces you to take her back, then she slips you her illegitimate child. I took out the photo. Yes, Jill has a daughter. At first, I thought she was his, but when I saw this photo, Mom, I knew that Anita was mine. When you see her, you will understand without a shadow of a doubt. Dad took the photo from me. I was wondering where she went. So when do we see Jill and that girl? Anita, you said. When you and Mom decide you can meet her without accusations. Dad nodded and turned to Mom. Aggie, you and I are going to talk. If this is Andrew's choice, so be it. If we have a granddaughter, I don't want your attitude to split our family. I called work and said that I wouldn't be in today. After washing and shaving, I got dressed and returned to Jill. The first thing she did was call in sick, right after dropping Anita off at school. 2 hours after leaving, I returned to Jill's apartment. We agreed that I would return, and the unspoken part of the agreement was that we would go to bed and make love. She tried to dress as best she could, but I recognized the dress as the one she had bought 18 months before we separated. Were things really so bad that she couldn't afford a new dress? I always liked this dress. You look beautiful, I told her as I picked her up. I'm glad, but I hope I won't wear it for so long. Andy, I want to spend the day in bed with you and talk like before. It's important to me that we find that kind of relationship again. I kissed her. We made love. That was good, Andy. I like being free. Jill had just said a word that summed up all the mistakes of the past, mistakes caused by our innocence that overshadowed the passion we undoubtedly felt for each other. Now we were free. From this moment on, our love would become wider and deeper than ever before, reaching a new level. It was a passion for having children. I noticed. Yes, my dear. I want your baby, a child you can hold, see his first steps, hear his first words. I want to give it all to you. I haven't taken any pills since. She hesitated. Earlier, there was no point because I had no intention of having intim with anyone. My night life is over. We got up and made the bed. Around 3 o'clock, since Jill had to pick Anita up from school at 4 o'clock, I went with Jill to pick up our daughter. We held hands along the way and held hands when Anita ran out of the gate. Mom, Dad, she turned to one of her friends. I told you that I would have a dad. This is Dad, Mr. Andy. She was overjoyed. It seemed like a lot of the kids at this school didn't have a father figure. We walked Anita home. She was between us, holding hands and swaying from time to time as we held her hands tightly. I went home after a cup of tea. I had to apologize to Gon for disappearing like that and also explain how important this photo was to my future. Dad was clearly talking to Mom, as she was a little reserved but more friendly. I told them I would talk to Jill about it and see if she wanted to meet them again so soon after we got together. Mom was a little indignant until Dad said firmly, Aggie. He then walked towards me and said, tell Jill that we would like to see her and meet our granddaughter, but only when she is comfortable. Then he reminded me of something else. There was another parent who didn't know anything about it. I found that Jill was ahead of me here. It took her several weeks to work up the courage to call her mother. Then one Saturday, she told me she had called her mom. What did she say? I asked. Jill grinned. Actually, quite a lot. Most of it was about how she was ashamed of me, that I wasn't raised to behave this way, and that even though I behaved so badly, I could still keep in touch with her. And although she didn't like what I did, I was still her daughter. I finally spoke up and told her that we had made up and that we would get married again. After that, she didn't say anything. I just burst into tears, and I was afraid that I would too. She looked up at me. Can we go see her tomorrow? I'm expecting to get a lecture on how to be faithful to my husband. Although she always liked you and would like to see you again, she stopped and looked at me lovingly. I don't need a lecture. My daughter and I suffered for 8 years. I would rather die than go through this again, because the thought of not having you in my life is too terrible to contemplate. Jill was preparing food, so I stood in the kitchen while we talked. The room was so small that if I tried to help, it would be a big obstacle. But we had so much to say that I had to be there and chat. Jill took the chicken out of the oven to check it and simply put it back when she asked, "Maybe we should also go to your parents?" "No, Dad is fine, but Mom has problems and might tell you something that will hurt you. If she hurts you, she will cause pain to me, so it's probably best if we stay away until Dad finishes talking to her." "I don't mind. She can't tell me anything that I haven't already told myself." "Jill, I want to put an end to this recrimination. The more I think about it, the more I believe we know why everything went wrong. Let's concentrate on getting it right." She looked at me with a cheeky grin. "Well, it looks like you're doing well on that front. I wouldn't mind anything else like that." There was only one step left, and I was next to her. And what will I get? In any case, I will never refuse. We were saved from further intimacy when Anita announced her presence. "Mom, you only kiss me when I go to bed." "Dad, Mr. Andy gets a lot more than I do." I smiled and followed Anita. "How about I kiss you too?" Anita laughed, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me on the cheek. I kissed her cheek back. She giggled. Jill joined us, and we all kissed. Anita giggled and laughed. She loved this game. She tried to get down, and I gently laid her down, whereupon she ran away laughing, satisfied that she had shared. Jill felt sad for a moment. "Hey," I said, "what is it about you, Anita, and me? You get along so well with her that I'm sad and angry that I didn't let you be here when she was growing up. If only I had the courage to wait for you before I got my things, we might have fought, but maybe we would have stayed together." I took her in my arms. "You know, it could have been terrible. I was hoping that you would come and talk, but I also know that my hurt and anger will force me to tell you so many terrible things. Now the water is under the bridge, we are together. We can't change the past, but we can create the future." Jill wasn't the best cook in the world, although she was much better than me. Sometimes I wonder how I managed to survive those 8 years in London without getting poisoned. It was nice to sit and eat as a family. Anita was a picky eater and did not like vegetables, preferring to eat only meat and potatoes. Jill watched in amazement as I tried to get Anita to eat some sprouts and carrots. In the end, the blackmail won out by suggesting that the vegetables would help her grow big, and then when we went to Alton Towers, she could go on the rides even more. Anita also winced but ate the vegetables. The next morning, we called to visit Jill's mom. She greeted me warmly but devoted most of her greeting to Anita. Anita understood Grandma's concept as it was another opportunity for a treat. However, Mrs. Walton was too treacherous a lady to do this. They had come to a somewhat uneasy truce. There would be treats, but on a normal basis and not showered unconditionally. Jill was not able to completely free herself from the Scots. Her mother said she didn't deserve me after what she did. Jill agreed with everything her mom said. However, the worst thing for Jill was the punishment for not bringing Anita to her grandmother sooner. Jill explained, "Mom, you wouldn't believe Anita is Andy's baby. I couldn't take her with me if she was ostracized. Anita was innocent." I played with Anita while they went into the kitchen to argue. Sometimes we forget how a child seems happily playing by herself. Here's something. We had already gotten into the car when Anita spoke from behind. "Mom, is Daddy, Mr. Andy, really my dad?" I raised my eyebrows at Jill, essentially telling her this was for her to sort out. Jill took a deep breath and turned to Anita. "Yes, darling, he's your real dad. Andy and I were once married, and I did something very wrong, so we got divorced. But we really loved each other all this time, and Andy decided to come back and make us a family again. There was silence as Anita considered this. This is cute. Jill turned to look ahead and breathed a sigh of relief. Then a question came from behind. Can I call Daddy Mr. Andy just Daddy? Now I answered, I would be very happy if you did. Okay, Daddy. I had a list of properties for sale, and we drove around looking at communities to see if we liked them. We found one that was pretty good, but Jill protested. We can't afford this. She looked at the asking price in the brochure. Do you like it? Of course I like it. It looks like a lovely house, but look at the price. At that time, we were sitting near the house, and a man was working in the front garden. He watched us for a while, then came over. I rolled down the window. He saw the brochure. What are you looking for? Yes, I thought about calling the agent and setting up a meeting. Why don't you look now? I'm sure my wife won't mind. The owner of the house showed us around. It was gorgeous, freshly painted inside and out, with 4 bedrooms, a walk-through living room from front to back, and a large kitchen with a dining area connecting the kitchen to the living room. Jill tugged at my sleeve. This is too much, Andy, she whispered. I repeated the question I asked her earlier. Do you like it? This is wonderful, but this is too much. I pointed to Anita, who had gone out into the back garden with the man. There was a swing, and he was gently rocking her back and forth. I asked the woman if it was possible to change the price. She went and talked to her husband. She took over the swing with Anita, and he came back to talk to us. We have no room for negotiation. However, if you can exchange contracts quickly enough, say within 60 days, we will reduce it by $5,000. Thank you. This is Jack, he introduced himself. Jack Sturges. This is my wife, Marie. We're Andy and Jill Graham. We like the house. Give us a day to discuss everything, but I'm sure we'll come up with a proposal within 48 hours. I am confident that we can complete the project within 60 days. Jill was still tugging at my sleeve, getting more and more worried. I ignored her. I shook Jack's hand, and Marie brought Anita back. As we were about to leave, she smiled. They told me all about your visit to Alton Towers, about the rides that happened with Anita and, of course, about some that Dad says are too dangerous for little girls. She also told me that she needs to be a good girl, otherwise, Mommy and Daddy will get angry. Her gaze then changed to stern. She said, lowering her voice, I was also told that Mom and Dad will get married soon. Anita is too informative at times. Jill smiled and told her that we had been married before, separated, and realized it was a mistake, so we got married again. Back in the car, Jill expressed her concerns. That's too much money, Andy. I told you I can't help you with the mortgage at all. We can't afford this. I stopped and turned to her. Yes, we can, Jill. I explained how I benefited from the real estate boom in the Southeast. I can put down a deposit of 50%, and my salary will easily cover the mortgage on the rest. Jill was stunned. You mean we can buy this house? Yes. This is wonderful. School's nearby, a train station just down the road, 4 bedrooms, which means we can create an office. But you have to agree. Oh, I agree. I wouldn't disagree with this new confidant, Andy. Study? Why do we need research? Because, Jill, I want you to quit your job. I know you don't like this job, so it shouldn't upset you. Andy, do you want me to stay at home and be a housewife? Yes. I want you to be a college-educated housewife. Jill was puzzled. Andy, you could easily go to university. You are smarter than me, although sometimes you do the stupidest things. I smiled. Jill smiled too. I want you to study at the Open University and get a degree in any subject you want. That's why you'll need a place to work. You do the stupidest things too. For example, you came back for me. It was stupid but also the most loving thing my past and future husband could do. I will spend my life telling you about this and showing you that it was not a mistake. I already know that. Why should I get a diploma? You always wanted this, and if it weren't for your father's death, you would have done it. That's why you inspired me so much. Now I will encourage you. It's not about a career, it's about you achieving what you've wanted your whole life. Besides, I always wanted to sleep with a university graduate. Jill looked back. Anita had fallen asleep, so excited about the day that it was not surprising. After checking, Jill leaned towards me, lowering her voice. So you want to have a night with the university graduate, right? Well, I already want to, and I can tell you that it's damn wonderful. If it weren't for Anita in the back seat, we would have done it. We were laughing now. Little children are nature's protection, you know. I was able to get a mortgage easily, as I paid a large deposit and had experience with a building society. They held a mortgage on a property in Upminster. Since my lawyer was handling the legal issues and had to ensure that we could get the promised $5,000 reduction, we took the next step, meeting with the vicar of St. Peter's Cathedral. Jill's mom looked after Anita for us while we were there. This was the church where we got married. Vicar Peter Mantle was a new, rather young man, but since the church did not approve of divorce, he was initially unhappy until Jill explained that it was a remarriage. We got married here 14 years ago. I broke my vows, and we got divorced. Now we want to get married again. He became incredibly cheerful. I don't see any problems with this. If you were marrying someone other than your previous partner, I wouldn't do it, but in this case, we are simply correcting the state's mistake. The ceremony was scheduled to last 4 weeks. The banns had to be read 3 Sundays in a row. He asked Jill if she would like to come to him for a consultation. I've lived with my guilt for 8 years, 8 painful years. Just like my husband, he came back to find me, and I believe God directed his steps. The only thing I want is to make my vows to my husband again before God, knowing that this time I will keep them. He asked a few more questions, gently probing. Nodding, he realized the pressure and love that brought us to this current state. He asked if we wanted a modern service. Jill was quick to answer, no. I would like the King James service to fully use the word obey. Peter turned to me. Are you happy with this? Wonderful. Jill has faith, and I don't. Is this causing you problems? Oh no. I think most church marriages these days are between couples neither of whom have faith or regularly attend church. We welcome everyone and hope that one day they will discover the truth. We left the priest's house. Jill suddenly stopped. We need to go visit your parents. I didn't think it was such a good idea. Last night my mother was still upset. I suggested leaving it for a while. How long, Andy? We agreed to get married again in 4 weeks. Your mom won't thank you for forcing this on her at the last minute. It's time for us to go. If she wants to yell at me, so be it. I deserve it. We should introduce her to our granddaughter. She smiled slightly. It might soften her anger a little. Jill was right. When we walked in, Anita was acting her usual boisterous self. Dad greeted Jill with a hug. God, girl. I couldn't wait to see you again. Mom was a little tough, but when we introduced Anita, her doubts disappeared the moment she saw her. She realized that Anita was really her granddaughter. She hugged Anita and stood up, looking hesitantly at Jill. Then she opened her arms, and Jill immediately rushed into her embrace. Tears flowed like a river from this emotional meeting. Dad looked at me and made the universal gesture of raising his eyebrows, expressing bewilderment. Why do women always cry at such moments? Mom and Jill went to dry their tears and, of course, make tea. Dad spoke to Anita, who happily announced, "We're getting married." Mom and Dad went to see a man at the church. Dad raised his eyebrows, asking with his eyes. I think Jill is telling her mom about it now, so the answer is yes, we'll get married again. Okay, when? I gave the date and time. You and Mom will be there, right? Of course. And don't worry about your mother, everything will be fine now. She has a granddaughter, her first, and she'll be too busy buying things for Anita to worry about anything else. Anita heard her dad's last words and immediately began listing what she thought she should get. Her entire list consisted of toys, of course. Knowing Jill's financial situation, I wanted to help with her wedding dress. After much thought, so as not to offend her, I came up with a perfect plan. I gave the money to her mom, and she promised that Jill would never find out. For weeks later, I was standing on the steps leading to the side chapel choir, chatting with Reverend Peter while waiting for Jill. I ordered an organist and a choir since there were too few of us to sing the hymns loudly. The organist played soft music to relieve the tension of anticipation. Suddenly, the music stopped. Peter addressed the crowd. "We'll sing one of Jill's favorite hymns, All Things Bright and Beautiful." A moment later, the organist played the first part of the chorus, and we began to sing this beautiful hymn as Jill, holding Anita's hand, walked slowly down the aisle. They walked alone. I turned around. She wore an elegant green shantung silk suit with a tight skirt ending just below the knees and a jacket buttoned to the throat. On her head, she wore a small hat with a veil that reached to her eyes. In her hands, she held a bouquet of freesias, her favorite flowers. Anita was also in green, wearing a beautiful frilly dress, white long socks, and green shoes. Jill was serious. Anita smiled widely. Jill came up to me, handed the bouquet to Anita, and led her to us. Then she took my arm with a smile. When the last verse ended, everyone sat down. I leaned over and touched Anita's shoulder. When she looked at me, I put my finger to my lips, indicating for her to be quiet. She nodded and smiled. Peter Mantle stood on the steps and quietly asked Jill if everything was okay. Jill smiled happily. He cleared his throat and then turned to the families and friends. "Before we begin the marriage ceremony, I would like to say a few words. I am a priest, after all, and you know how we take every opportunity to preach a sermon." There was light laughter. When Andrew, a little voice, chimed in. "Andy!" Peter smiled at Anita. "Yes, of course, Anita, you're right." When Andy and Jill came to me and asked to get married again, I was delighted. I was even more pleased when I heard their story because, at its core, it is a love story. Our Lord teaches us that love is the most important feeling in this world and that loving each other and loving our neighbors is the way. Jill and Andy have this love for each other that has allowed them to overcome adversity and still love. This says a lot. There is something else here, too. Andy claims that he is not a believer, but his actions, loving Jill and forgiving, speak of a mercy that most men could not imagine. "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." These words are at the core of our Christian faith. He may not be a believer, but he has more of a Christian attitude than many who come to this church every Sunday and call themselves Christians. As our Lord said, "By their works you will know them." No matter what Andy says about his faith, our Lord knows his works and will treat him accordingly. He looked at me and winked. "So, Andy, it doesn't matter what you think, God will decide." He gave everyone time to think, then began. He raised his head and spoke those majestic cadences first uttered 400 years ago, which have resonated from the roofs and stone walls of Anglican churches millions of times. "Beloved, we are gathered here in the presence of God and in the presence of this community to unite this man and this woman in sacred matrimony." I did not hear the rest. Jill's hand tightened its grip on mine, and I placed my hand on hers. Tears slowly flowed down her face. Her face glowed with happiness. Dimly, I heard the answers and pronounced my vows correctly. Jill's calm but clear voice spoke her vows with determination, placing emphasis on the word obey. The ring I took out of my pocket and placed on the Bible was original. Jill convinced me that it would be more symbolic for her to bless it again. We went to Penn's Hall for the wedding breakfast. Jill asked Reverend Peter to join us. No poor vicar would ever turn down a free meal. I would be glad. "May I bring my wife?" We, of course, agreed and were happy when we found out that Rachel, his wife, was an organist. Penn's provided us with a private dining room, which was perfect. There was no formality in our meeting. Friends and relatives chatted freely, especially when they had drinks in their hands. My cousin, Jen, spoke to Anita and showed her a photo of my mother. Anita said loudly, "I don't remember being photographed." She ran up to Jill. "Mom, when was this photo taken? I've never owned a dress like this." My mom grabbed it and said it was a photo of her when she was 11. Anita was confused, and her mother sat her down to explain. Jill turned to me. I have a feeling we'll have to answer Anita's questions soon, Anita, about how mothers and fathers make children. You might be right. I think we'll need to practice a lot. We can't afford to make mistakes now, can we? Jill was delighted. Oh, I think you know how to make babies. I thought about her remark. We chose one large round table and left a seat between Jill and me for Anita, but it wasn't necessary, as the little rascal made a royal round of the table, sitting on everyone's laps and taking small bites from the plates of those nearby. The mixture was supposed to be terrible. She would either get sick later or sleep like the dead. Coffee had just been served when I stood up and waited until everyone had quieted down. I wanted to thank you all for being with us today. Your support is very important and greatly appreciated. I have loved Jill since we were 17, loved her in the early years of our marriage, and through all our difficulties. My love never faded when we were separated, and now it is stronger than ever. My life is complete with her and my daughter, who is right now trying to steal mint chocolate from her grandmother's plate. Behave! Anita watched with an innocent expression on her face, trying to look sweet with a small smile, hoping it would distract from further reprimand. I finished my thanks to everyone and proposed a toast to my beautiful wife. As I sat down, Jill stood up. I would like to add my gratitude to my husband's words. I also want to say a special thank you to Andy. I am a very happy woman. Most wives believe that their husbands love them. I am happy to know that my husband loves me without any doubt because he chose me not once, but twice, and he took me as his wife not once, but twice. I don't need flowery words of love to know that Andy will stay with me, support me, and protect me. She paused to wipe away her tears. Our story is known to all of you. The mistake I made was very painful. Andy said he forgot it, but I will not forget. I will think about it every day and the terrible consequences. Keeping this in mind, I will never repeat this mistake. She paused. Most of you know that Andy is an English graduate, which of course means that he uses 3 long words to say what any other person would say in one short one. Now I will use his style to break the news to him. Andy, my dear husband, you loved me and took me back as your wife. I live in the warmth of your love every day, and now I believe, hope, and pray that your love has brought life to my womb again. Thank you, most beloved of men. She leaned over and whispered in my ear, my period didn't come twice. I understood what she meant and was delighted, but I should have noticed that her words were archaic, not flowery at all. That was her comment. However, we had to confirm to some that Jill meant she was pregnant. Anita was delighted with the idea of a sibling. For her, it meant another round at the table to tell everyone. That boy and that girl who met at the university have now grown up, hardened by difficulties and confident in themselves for having overcome them. To others, we were a typical married couple of the time, confident in our love for each other and happily raising children. Yes, Jill was pregnant, and she gave us another daughter, Rebecca, to love. We were responsible members of society, but what this society did not see was that within us lay that boy and girl who fell in love at 17 and who often broke out of the cocoon of adulthood in our moments together to laugh and giggle about silly things, to be playful and to love each other. And I actually went to bed with a university graduate. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the husband did the right thing and he was very lucky that he saw his wife, because he could have missed it and it would have dragged on even longer.
Let's move on to the second video.
Elias Blackwood's pen scratched across the blueprint, making minute adjustments to the design of his latest skyscraper. The clock on his office wall ticked past 9 p.m., but he barely noticed. This project was his magnum opus, the crowning achievement of his career. He was so engrossed that the shrill ring of his cell phone made him jump, leaving an errant line across the paper. Irritated, he grabbed the phone, ready to berate whoever was interrupting his work, but the caller ID gave him pause. It was Caleb, his son. He never called this late unless something was wrong. "Caleb, what's going on?" Elias asked, his annoyance replaced by concern. "Dad," Caleb's voice cracked, trembling with emotion. I saw Mom at the Red Moon Hotel." Elias frowned, confused. "Okay, your mother's allowed to go to a hotel, son." "No, Dad. She was with Marcus, your partner." The words hit Elias like a physical blow. He sat heavily in his chair, mind reeling. "What do you mean, with Marcus?" "They were together." "Like together." Elias' throat went dry. "Send it to me now." Seconds later, his phone buzzed. With shaking hands, he opened the video file. The footage was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking the figures on the hotel balcony. Vanessa, his wife of 20 years, was wrapped in the arms of Marcus, his business partner of 15 years. But it got worse. As Elias watched, stomach churning, he could make out snippets of their conversation. Push Elias out. Take control of the firm. He'll never see it coming. The betrayal was complete, not just his marriage, but his livelihood, his life's work, all of it a lie. Elias took a deep breath, forcing down the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. He needed to think clearly now. Caleb, listen to me carefully. Go home immediately. Don't tell your mother you saw her. Don't let on that anything's wrong. They'll handle this. But Dad, Caleb, go home and act normal. I promise he'll explain everything. After hanging up, Elias sat motionless for a long moment, mind racing. Then, with deliberate calm, he picked up his office phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Jack, it's Elias Blackwood. I need your help. My wife's been unfaithful, and I want to initiate divorce proceedings immediately. Yes, I have proof. I also need you to freeze our joint accounts and start the process of protecting my assets. No, this can't wait until morning. I'm coming to your office now. Hanging up, Elias gathered his things and headed for the door. As he switched off the lights, he cast one last look at the blueprint on his desk. The errant line head drawn earlier now bisected the entire design, like a crack in the foundation of everything he had built. How fitting, he thought bitterly, before stepping out into the night, leaving behind the ruins of his old life. Vanessa Blackwood hummed to herself as she pulled into the driveway, still riding the high of her afternoon tryst with Marcus. The house was dark and quiet as she entered, which wasn't unusual. Elias often worked late, and Caleb was probably holed up in his room with his video games. She flicked on the kitchen light, then froze. Something was off. The air felt different, charged with an unseen tension. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on a stack of papers on the counter that hadn't been there this morning. Heart pounding, she approached slowly, as if the papers might bite. The top sheet bore an official-looking letterhead, Notice of Divorce Proceedings. No. She whispered, fingers trembling as she leafed through the stack. Divorce papers, bank statements, and screenshots from a video of her and Marcus on the hotel balcony. The blood drained from Vanessa's face as the reality of the situation crashed over her. He knew. Somehow, Elias knew everything. Panic rose in her throat as she fumbled for her phone, trying Elias' number. A robotic voice informed her the line had been disconnected. Frantic now, she tried Caleb's phone. Same result. No, 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 she muttered, racing upstairs. Caleb's room was empty. His closet was half bare. In the master bedroom, Elias' side of the closet gaped open. His suitcase was gone. Back downstairs, Vanessa booted up the family computer, hands shaking as she tried to access their joint bank accounts. Frozen, not drained, thank God, but completely inaccessible. She slumped into a chair, mind reeling. How had it all fallen apart so quickly? Just this afternoon, she had been on top of the world, secure in the knowledge that her affair was safely hidden, that her plans with Marcus to take control of the firm were progressing smoothly. But she should have known better. Elias was always 3 steps ahead, always planning for every contingency. Of course, he wouldn't confront her directly. No, head strike from the shadows, methodical and merciless. As the shock began to wear off, fear set in. Vanessa knew her husband. He wouldn't stop at divorce. He'd make her pay for her betrayal, strip away everything she valued. And Marcus? Oh God, Marcus. Did he know yet? Were his accounts frozen too? Their entire plan was crumbling around her, and she was powerless to stop it. Vanessa reached for her phone again, this time dialing Marcus' number with shaking fingers. It rang once, twice. Vanessa? Marcus' voice was groggy. Do you know what time it is? He knows, she blurted out, unable to keep the panic from her voice. Elias knows everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was tight with fear. What do you mean, everything? The affair. The plan to push him out of the firm. All of it. He's filed for divorce. Frozen our accounts. He and Caleb are gone. Marcus breathed. How? We were so careful. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Careful enough to be caught on video, apparently. Marcus, what are we going to do? Another pause. Okay, don't panic. We need to think this through. Have you called your lawyer yet? No. I called you first. All right. Here's what we're going to do. Call your lawyer right now. They'll do the same. We need to get ahead of this before Elias can do any more damage. Then we'll meet first thing in the morning to figure out our next move. Vanessa nodded, forgetting Marcus couldn't see her. Okay, you're right. We can fix this. But as she hung up and dialed her lawyer's emergency number, a cold dread settled in the pit of her stomach. She knew Elias. He wouldn't have made a move like this without an airtight plan. Whatever came next, she had a sinking feeling they were already too late to stop it. The BMW's headlights cut through the darkness as Elias guided it down the empty highway. In the passenger seat, Caleb sat silently, staring out the window at the passing shadows. They had left the house just after midnight, slipping away like thieves in the night. Elias had been meticulous in his preparations, leaving no trace of their destination. New identities had been secured through channels. He had hoped never to use it, but waited for it at the end of his journey. He glanced at his son, heart aching at the pain etched on the boy's face. You okay, kid? Caleb shrugged, not looking away from the window. I guess. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can start over. What about mom and school? My friends. Elias sighed heavily. I know this is hard, Caleb, but your mother, she made her choice, and right now we need to protect ourselves by running away. It's not running away. It's a strategic retreat. We need time to regroup, to plan our next move. Caleb finally turned to look at his father, eyes shining with unshed tears. Did you know about Mom and Marcus? Elias's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No, I had no idea. How could she do this to us? The raw pain in his son's voice made Elias's chest tighten. He wanted nothing more than to pull over and comfort the boy, but they couldn't afford to stop, not yet. I don't know, son. People do terrible things sometimes. But I promise you, we're going to get through this together. Caleb nodded slowly, then turned back to the window. Elias's focus shifted to the road ahead, his mind already racing with plans and contingencies. He had left a cryptic message for his most trusted employee, ensuring the firm's projects would continue in his absence. It wasn't ideal, but it would buy them time. As the miles ticked by, Elias found his thoughts drifting to Vanessa and Marcus. By now, they'd be frantic, searching for any trace of him and Caleb. Part of him, a dark, vengeful part, relished the thought of their panic. Let them squirm. Let them feel a fraction of the pain they caused. But he pushed those thoughts aside. Revenge wasn't the goal here. Protection was. He needed to keep Caleb safe from the emotional fallout, give them both time to heal, and plan their next steps. And if his disappearing act threw Vanessa and Marcus off balance, preventing them from hiding assets or crafting alibis, well, that was just an added bonus. Dawn was breaking as they crossed the state line, the first rays of sunlight painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. Elias reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. We're going to be okay, Caleb. I promise. And as they drove on into the unknown, Elias silently vowed to make good on that promise, no matter the cost. Nathan Reed stood at the drafting table, his pencil dancing across the blueprint with practiced ease. The open concept office space around him hummed with quiet activity, a far cry from the sleek, high-powered firm he'd left behind 6 months ago. But there was a satisfaction in this work that he hadn't felt in years. He glanced up at the clock, nearly time for Ethan to be home from school. The name still felt strange on his tongue sometimes. Ethan, not Caleb. Just as he was Nathan now, not Elias. New names, new identities, a new life carefully constructed in the wake of betrayal. Portland, Maine, had been a calculated choice, far enough from their old life to avoid accidental recognition, but close enough to the architectural scene that Nathan's talents wouldn't go to waste. In waste they hadn't. His small firm was already gaining a reputation for innovative, sustainable urban designs. As if on cue, the bell above the office door chimed. Ethan trudged in, backpack slung over one shoulder, a half-eaten apple in his hand. Hey, kid, Nathan said, studying his son's face. The dark circles under Ethan's eyes seemed a shade lighter today. Progress, however small. How was school? Ethan shrugged, collapsing into a chair. Fine, I guess. We have a group project in history. My partner seems cool. Nathan nodded, careful to keep his expression neutral. Every new friendship was a potential risk, a crack in the armor of their carefully crafted anonymity. But he couldn't deny his son the chance at some normalcy. That's good, he said. Just remember, I know. Ethan cut him off. Keep it casual. Don't share too much personal info. I'm not an idiot, Dad. Nathan sighed. I know you're not. I just worry. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Yeah, I know. It's fine. I'm going to go do homework." As his son disappeared into the back room they'd converted into a makeshift living space, Nathan turned back to his work. But his mind wasn't on the blueprint anymore. It was 6 months in the past and hundreds of miles away. He booted up his encrypted laptop, fingers flying over the keys as he navigated through layers of security. Within moments, he was scanning the latest reports on Vanessa and Marcus's desperate attempts to find them. It had been almost comical at first, watching them flail about, hiring private investigators who came up empty-handed time and again. But lately, their efforts had taken on a more frantic edge. Nathan knew why. The lawsuits were piling up, the firm teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Good, he thought. Let them squirm. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to pay for what they'd done. Nathan's eyes flicked to a folder on his desktop, innocuously labeled Project X. Inside was a treasure trove of damning evidence, emails discussing fraudulent billing practices, records of kickbacks from contractors, proof of design stolen from junior architects. It had taken months of careful hacking and data mining to compile, but it would be worth it. Soon, very soon, he would spring the trap, and Vanessa and Marcus would learn the true cost of their betrayal. Nathan closed the laptop, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd been a fool once, blind to the machinations happening right under his nose. Never again. This time, he would be the one 3 steps ahead. And God help anyone who got in his way. Vanessa Blackwood stared at the stack of papers on her desk, each one a ticking time bomb, threatening to blow her carefully constructed world to pieces. Lawsuits from clients claiming breach of contract, demands for payment from suppliers, and worst of all, a notice from the bank warning of impending foreclosure on the firm's office building. How had it all gone so wrong, so quickly? She knew the answer, of course. It had started the moment Elias disappeared, taking Caleb with him. In the blink of an eye, she'd lost her husband, her son, and the steady hand that had guided their firm to success. At first, she and Marcus had been confident they could weather the storm. They had connections, talent, charm. But as the weeks turned to months, with no sign of Elias or Caleb, cracks began to show. Clients grew wary, questioning the stability of a firm whose founding partner had vanished without explanation. Junior architects, once eager to please, now watched them with suspicion in their eyes. And then the lawsuits started, one after another, like dominoes falling. Each one chipped away at their reputation, their resources, their resolve. A knock at the door jolted Vanessa from her brooding. Marcus entered, his once crisp suit looking rumpled, dark circles under his eyes mirroring her own. "Any word?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing. It's like they vanished into thin air." The PI hired in Boston thought he had a lead, but it turned out to be another dead end. Vanessa slumped in her chair. "We can't keep this up, Marcus. The money's running out, and if we don't find a way to settle these lawsuits, I know." Marcus ran a hand through his thinning hair. "But what choice do we have? If we can just find Elias, make him see reason." A bitter laugh escaped Vanessa's lips. "Make him see reason? After what we did, he'll destroy us, Marcus. You know he will." Before Marcus could respond, Vanessa's computer chimed with an incoming email. She opened it, eyes widening as she scanned the contents. "What is it?" Marcus asked, leaning over her shoulder to read. "It's a buyout offer for the firm." Marcus frowned. "From who?" "I don't know. Some holding company I've never heard of." "But Marcus, look at these numbers. This could solve everything." As they pored over the details of the offer, neither noticed the tiny camera hidden in the potted plant on Vanessa's desk, silently recording their every move. Elias leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he watched the live feed from Vanessa's office. The bait had been taken, just as he'd known it would be. It had been almost too easy, really. A series of shell companies, a trusted proxy to handle the negotiations, and suddenly, he held Vanessa and Marcus's fate in his hands. They were so desperate for a lifeline that they hadn't even questioned the oddly specific conditions of the buyout. Full disclosure of all company finances and projects, a non-compete clause that would effectively end their careers, and personal guarantees against any undisclosed liabilities. Elias chuckled darkly. They had signed it all. He knew. And in doing so, they'd handed him every scrap of evidence he needed to bury them. A noise from the other room caught his attention. Caleb. No, Ethan, he reminded himself, was home from school. Elias quickly closed the video feed and cleared his expression. No need for his son to see the depths of his plans for revenge. "Hey, kiddo," he called out as Ethan entered the room. "How was school?" Ethan shrugged, dropping his backpack on the floor. "Fine, I guess. We started a new unit in history. The teacher wants us to pick a historical figure to do a report on." Elias nodded, trying to inject enthusiasm into his voice. "That sounds interesting. Anyone in particular catch your eye?" "I was thinking maybe Frank Lloyd Wright," Ethan said, a hint of his old passion for architecture creeping into his voice. "You know, since we're supposed to be this big architecture family and all." The words were like a knife to Elias's heart. This big architecture family, the life they'd left behind, the legacy he'd built, tainted now by betrayal. But he forced a smile. "That's a great choice." He was a visionary. "I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job on the report." Ethan nodded, then hesitated, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. "Dad, do you think? I mean, is there any chance we might be able to go home soon? Back to our real names?" Elias's jaw tightened. "Ethan, we've talked about this. It's not safe yet. Your mother and Marcus. I know." "I know," Ethan cut him off. "They betrayed you. They're trying to find us, blah, blah, blah. But, Dad, it's been months. Don't you think maybe it's time to, I don't know, try to work things out for real instead of all this cloak and dagger stuff?" For a moment, Elias was tempted to tell his son everything. Everything about the evidence he'd gathered, the trap he was setting, the reckoning that was coming. But he held back. Ethan was still so young, still clinging to the hope of reconciliation. He wasn't ready to see the full extent of the betrayal or the lengths. He wondered how far Elias would go to make it right. "I'm working on it, son," he said instead. "I promise we won't have to live like this forever. Just trust me a little longer, okay?" Ethan nodded, though the doubt in his eyes was clear as he trudged off to his room. Elias turned back to his computer, his mind already racing with the next steps of his plan. Soon, he told himself, soon it would all be over, and they could go back to their real lives. But first, Vanessa and Marcus had to pay. And pay they would in full. Jack Hawthorne prided himself on being the best private investigator in the business. He had cracked cases that had stumped the FBI, tracked down people who didn't want to be found in countries that barely appeared on maps. But this Elias Blackwood case was starting to make him question his skills. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the web of connections and dead ends pinned to his office wall. 6 months of work, and he was no closer to finding Blackwood or his son than he had been on day one. It didn't make sense. A man like Blackwood, a successful architect with a high profile in the industry, doesn't just disappear without a trace. There should have been something: credit card transactions, phone records, school enrollments for the kid. But there was nothing. It was like they had ceased to exist the moment they'd driven away from their home that night. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed as they fell on a recent addition to his evidence board, a series of architectural designs that had been popping up in Portland over the last few months. Innovative, sustainable urban projects that bore a striking resemblance to Blackwood's style. It was a long shot, he knew. Plenty of architects were jumping on the sustainability bandwagon these days, but something about these designs nagged at him. The attention to detail, the clever solutions to complex urban planning issues, it all screamed Elias Blackwood. He had sent an associate up to Portland to snoop around, but so far, nothing concrete had turned up. The designs were credited to a Nathan Reed, a newcomer to the Portland scene with a suspiciously thin background. Hawthorne's computer pinged, alerting him to a new email. He opened it, eyebrows raising as he scanned the contents. His associate in Portland had managed to snap a few long-distance photos of this Nathan Reed character. The images were grainy, taken from too far away to be conclusive, but there was something in the set of the man's shoulders, the way he carried himself. Hawthorne's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up an old photo of Elias Blackwood for comparison. He overlaid the images, adjusting for the difference in resolution. "Gotcha," he muttered, a predatory grin spreading across his face. He reached for his phone, ready to call his client with the good news, but something made him pause, finger hovering over the dial button. This was big, career-defining big, the kind of case that could set him up for life if he played his cards right. Did he really want to hand it over to Vanessa Blackwood just yet? No. He decided he needed more concrete proof, not just a hunch based on some grainy photos. He'd give it a few more days, see what else he could dig up on this Nathan Reed character. Little did Hawthorne know, his hesitation had just bought Elias Blackwood the time he needed to spring his trap. "Caleb, no, Ethan, he reminded himself for the 100th time, staring at the blank document on his laptop screen. The cursor blinked mockingly, daring him to start his history report on Frank Lloyd Wright. But his mind wasn't on famous architects or groundbreaking designs. It was back home, with his old friends, his old life, with his mother. He glanced at the door to make sure his dad wasn't around, then opened an incognito browser window. His fingers hesitated over the keys for a moment before he typed in a familiar name, Jake Thompson. Jake had been his best friend since kindergarten. They'd done everything together, Little League, science fairs, marathon gaming sessions that stretched late into the night. And now, because of his parents' mess, Ethan had ghosted him without a word of explanation. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. Before he could talk himself out of it, Ethan navigated to an encrypted messaging app he had discovered online. He created a new account under a fake name and sent a message to Jake's gaming handle. "Hey man, it's me. I know it's been a while, but I just wanted to let you know I'm okay. I can't say much, but I miss you guys. Hope you're doing all right." His finger hovered over the send button. He knew it was risky. His dad had drummed into him the importance of maintaining their cover, of not leaving any digital breadcrumbs that could lead back to them. But he was so tired of lying, of pretending to be someone he wasn't. He just wanted one small connection to his old life. Was that really so much to ask? Taking a deep breath, Ethan hit send. The message disappeared into the ether, and he quickly closed the browser window, heart pounding. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, in a nondescript office hundreds of miles away, a small alert popped up on Jack Hawthorne's computer. The PI had cast a wide net in his search for the Blackwoods, including monitoring known associates for any unusual activity. An encrypted message sent to Jake Thompson's gaming account from an unknown source definitely qualified as unusual. As Hawthorne began the process of tracing the message, Ethan sat back in his chair, a mix of relief and anxiety churning in his gut. He'd done it. He'd reached out. Now, all he could do was wait and hope that somehow, someway, things would work out. Elias's fingers flew over the keyboard, lines of code scrolling across the screen faster than the eye could follow. He detected the breach in their security almost instantly, a single outgoing message from Ethan's computer to an encrypted messaging service. His first instinct had been anger. He trusted Ethan to understand the gravity of their situation, to follow the rules he laid out so carefully. But as he worked to erase the digital footprint left by his son's moment of weakness, that anger gave way to something else. Understanding, compassion. Ethan was just a kid, after all. A kid who'd been ripped away from everything and everyone he knew, forced to live a life of secrecy for months on end. Of course, he'd reach out eventually. Elias should have seen it coming. As he finished covering their tracks, Elias leaned back in his chair, mind racing. This close call was a wake-up call. He had been so focused on his plans for revenge, on protecting them from external threats, that he had neglected the very real danger of Ethan's isolation and unhappiness. He needed to accelerate his plans. The longer they lived this half-life, straddling the line between their old identities and their new ones, the greater the risk became, not just of discovery, but of losing Ethan altogether. Decision made, Elias pulled up the file containing all the evidence he had gathered against Vanessa and Marcus. It was time to spring the trap. Time to end this once and for all. As he began to put the final pieces of his plan into motion, Elias allowed himself a small, grim smile. Vanessa and Marcus thought they'd won when they betrayed him. They had no idea of the storm that was about to break over their heads. Let them come, he thought. Let them try to find us. We'll be ready. And this time, I'll be the one holding all the cards. The game was entering its final stages, and Elias Blackwood intended to win. Vanessa Blackwood's heels clicked against the polished concrete floor of the Portland office building, each step echoing with grim determination. Beside her, Marcus fidgeted nervously, his eyes darting from side to side as if expecting an ambush at any moment. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered for what felt like the 100th time since they landed in Maine. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice, Marcus. If Hawthorne's right, if Elias is really here, we have to confront him before he can do any more damage." The elevator doors slid open to reveal a modestly appointed hallway. At the end, a frosted glass door bore the name, Reed Architectural Solutions, in sleek, modern lettering. Vanessa's heart pounded as they approached. Nathan Reed, the name Hawthorne had given them, the alias Elias had apparently been hiding behind all these months. It was almost laughable, really. Did he think a new name would be enough to erase their history? Without hesitation, she pushed open the door. The reception area was empty, but voices drifted from an open office beyond. One of them, achingly familiar, stopped her in her tracks. And if we adjust the solar panels here, we can increase efficiency by at least 15%, Elias. After all this time, all the sleepless nights and frantic searching, he was right there, just a few steps away. Vanessa strode forward, Marcus trailing behind like a reluctant shadow. As they entered the main office space, the conversation abruptly ceased. Elias, no, Nathan, now stood at a drafting table, blueprints spread before him. Beside him, a lanky teenager, who could only be Caleb, stared at them with wide, shocked eyes. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Elias straightened, his expression hardening into a mask of cold fury. "Well," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "isn't this a pleasant surprise? To what do I owe the honor?" Vanessa struggled to find her voice. All the speeches she rehearsed on the plane, all the explanations and accusations, seemed to evaporate in the face of Elias's icy stare. It was Marcus who broke the silence, stepping forward with a nervous chuckle. "Come on, Elias, enough of this cloak and dagger nonsense. We're here to talk. That's all. To work things out like adults." Elias's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Work things out? Is that what you call it? Tell me, Marcus, which part exactly are we working out? The part where you, my wife? Or the part where you plan to steal my company out from under me?" Marcus blanched, taking an involuntary step back. Vanessa forced herself to meet Elias's gaze. "We made mistakes," she said quietly. "Terrible mistakes. But disappearing like this, taking Caleb. Elias, you have to see how wrong that is." "Do I?" Elias's voice was dangerously soft. "Do I really, Vanessa? Because from where I'm standing, protecting my son from two manipulative, self-serving liars seems pretty damn right." Caleb, or whatever name he was going by now, shifted uncomfortably. "Dad," he began, but Elias silenced him with a look. "It's okay, son," he said, his tone gentling slightly. "Why don't you go wait in the back room? The adults need to have a chat for a moment." It looked like Caleb might argue, but something in Elias's expression must have convinced him, because he nodded and slipped out of the room without another word. As soon as the door closed behind him, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elias's eyes, cold as winter frost, swept over Vanessa and Marcus. "So," he said, "you found me. Congratulations. I'm sure whatever bottom-feeding PI you hired is very proud of himself. The question is, what exactly do you hope to accomplish here?" Vanessa took a deep breath, steeling herself. "We want to make things right, Elias. The company is falling apart without you. The lawsuits, the financial troubles, we can fix it together. Come home. Let's put this whole ugly mess behind us." For a moment, something flickered in Elias' eyes, regret, longing, but it was gone so quickly that Vanessa couldn't be sure she'd seen it at all. "Put it behind us?" Elias repeated, his voice flat. "Just like that? Wave a magic wand and pretend none of it ever happened? Is that really what you think is going to happen here?" Marcus, apparently emboldened by the lack of immediate violence, stepped forward. "Look, we all made mistakes, but dragging this out, hiding away like some kind of fugitive, it's not good for anyone, especially not Caleb. Think about his future, Elias. His friends, his school. You can't keep him isolated forever." It was the wrong thing to say. Elias's expression darkened, a storm gathering behind his eyes. "His future?" He snarled. "Don't you dare pretend to care about my son's future. Not after what you've done." "What we've done?" Marcus' own temper flared. "You're the one who kidnapped him, who's forcing him to live some ridiculous false life. You think his new friends would stick around if they knew the truth? Maybe I should go tell them right now. I'm sure they'd be very interested to learn that their buddy, Ethan, or whatever you're calling him, is really—" He never got to finish the sentence. In 2 quick strides, Elias closed the distance between them, his fist connecting with Marcus' jaw with a sickening crack. Marcus stumbled backward, blood trickling from a split lip. Just then, Caleb's voice cut through the chaos. He stood in the doorway, eyes wide with shock and fear. Elias froze, his raised fist slowly lowering. For a moment, the mask of cold fury slipped, revealing a glimpse of the pain and anguish beneath. "It's okay, Caleb," he said softly. "Everything's going to be okay. I promise." Vanessa, who had been watching the confrontation with growing horror, saw her chance. "Caleb, honey," she said, taking a tentative step towards her son. I've missed you so much. Please, can we just talk? Your father and I, we can work this out. We can be a family again. Caleb's eyes darted between his parents, confusion and conflict written across his face. For a heart-stopping moment, Vanessa thought he might actually come to her. But then his expression hardened, and he moved to stand beside Elias. No, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. No, we can't. Elias placed a protective hand on Caleb's shoulder, his eyes never leaving Vanessa and Marcus. I think, he said, his voice deceptively calm, it's time for you to leave. Marcus, still nursing his bloodied lip, opened his mouth to argue, but Vanessa grabbed his arm, shaking her head slightly. This confrontation had gone sideways in every possible way. They needed to regroup, to figure out their next move. This isn't over, Elias, she said as they backed towards the door. You can't run forever. Elias's smile was cold and sharp as an ice edge. Oh, I'm not running anymore, Vanessa. In fact, I'm just getting started. As the door closed behind them, Vanessa felt a chill run down her spine. She'd come here expecting to find Elias broken, desperate. Instead, she'd found a man filled with icy resolve, a man with a plan. And suddenly, she was very, very afraid of what that plan might be. Elias waited until he was sure Vanessa and Marcus were gone before he allowed himself to slump against the drafting table, the adrenaline draining from his system and leaving him feeling hollow and drained. Dad, Caleb's voice was small, uncertain. Are you okay? Elias straightened, forcing a reassuring smile onto his face. I'm fine, son. It's been a long day. Caleb nodded, but his eyes were troubled. What happens now? Now, Elias said, his voice hardening with resolve. We finished this once and for all. He crossed to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard as he pulled up file after file, evidence he'd spent months compiling. Each damning piece of information was a nail in Vanessa and Marcus's coffin. I need you to listen carefully, Caleb, he said, not looking up from the screen. What I'm about to do, it's going to change everything, and I need to know that you understand why it has to be done. Slowly, methodically, Elias laid out the extent of Vanessa and Marcus's crimes, the fraudulent billing practices, the kickbacks from contractors, the design stolen from junior architects and passed off as their own work. With each revelation, Caleb's expression grew more horrified. How could they do all this? He whispered. Greed, Elias said simply. Arrogance. The belief that they could get away with anything. He turned to face his son fully, his expression grave. I know I've asked a lot of you these past months, the new identity, the secrecy. It wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry for that. But I needed time to gather all of this, to make sure they couldn't wiggle their way out of it. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had just learned. Finally, he looked up at his father, a new resolve in his eyes. What do we do now? Elias smiled, a grim, satisfied expression. Now we spring the trap. With a few keystrokes, he sent off a series of pre-prepared emails to the FBI, to the American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee, to key members of the press. By this time tomorrow, he said, everyone will know exactly what kind of people Vanessa Blackwood and Marcus Reeves really are. As if on cue, his phone began to ring. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. Elias answered, putting the phone on speaker. Hello, Vanessa. I assumed by now you received my little care package. Vanessa's voice was shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. What have you done, Elias? Do you have any idea? Oh, I have a very good idea. Elias cut her off. I have a good idea of exactly what you and Marcus have been up to all these years. The fraud, the theft, all of it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want? What I want, Elias said, is for you and Marcus to come back to my office immediately. We have some paperwork to go over. Marcus's voice, now sounding panicked, interrupted. What are you talking about? Confessions, Elias said simply. Detailed confessions of every illegal thing you've done, along with some, let's call them non-disclosure agreements. You'll sign them all, or I'll make sure every scrap of evidence I have ends up in the hands of the authorities. You can't do this. Vanessa hissed. You'll destroy everything we built. Elias's laugh was bitter. No, Vanessa, you destroyed it. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice defeated. We'll be there in 10 minutes. As the call disconnected, Elias turned to Caleb. His son's face was pale, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Caleb asked. Elias nodded, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm sure. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it." As they waited for Vanessa and Marcus to arrive, Elias felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Soon, it would all be over. Justice would be served, and maybe, just maybe, he and Caleb could start to rebuild their lives. The next hour passed in a blur of tense silence and scratching pens. Vanessa and Marcus, their faces ashen, signed page after page of meticulously prepared documents, confessions detailing every fraudulent transaction, every stolen design, every ethical breach. Elias watched them with cold satisfaction, Caleb a silent presence at his side. This was it. The moment he'd been working towards for months, his revenge, served on crisp legal paper and bound with unbreakable contracts. As Vanessa signed the final page, her hand trembling slightly, she looked up at Elias with eyes full of despair. "Is this really what you want?" she asked softly. "To see us ruined, imprisoned?" For a moment, Elias faltered. The weight of their shared history, the good times, the love they'd once shared, pressed down on him. But then he remembered the betrayal, the pain, and his resolve hardened once more. "What I want," he said, his voice low and controlled, "is for you to face the consequences of your actions. Something you both seem to have avoided for far too long." Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the process, suddenly slammed his fist on the table. "You sanctimonious man," he snarled. "You think you're so much better than us? You've manipulated and schemed just as much as we ever did. You're no different." "That's enough." Caleb's voice, firm and clear, cut through Marcus's tirade. He stepped forward, fixing both Vanessa and Marcus with a hard stare. "You don't get to play the victims here. Not after what you've done." Vanessa flinched as if she'd been slapped. "Caleb, honey, please, no." Caleb shook his head. "I've heard enough. You betrayed Dad. You betrayed me. You betrayed everything our family was supposed to stand for. And for what? Money? Power? Was it worth it?" The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa and Marcus, for once, had no words. Elias placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder, a surge of pride mixing with the bittersweet realization that his son had grown up far too quickly in these past months. "It's done," he said quietly. "You should go now. Your lawyers will be in touch regarding the next steps." As Vanessa and Marcus gathered their things, moving like shell-shocked survivors of some great catastrophe, Elias felt the last of his anger drain away. In its place was a bone-deep weariness and an unexpected pang of regret, mourning for what might have been. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving Elias and Caleb alone in the suddenly too quiet office. "So, Caleb," said Elias, after a long moment. "What happens now?" Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. Now we start over. For real this time." He walked to the window, looking out at the Portland skyline. It was a beautiful view, one he'd come to appreciate over these past months. But it wasn't home, not really. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time for Elias and Caleb Blackwood to make their return." Caleb's eyes widened. "You mean we can go back? Use our real names?" Elias nodded. "The truth is going to come out soon enough. There's no point in hiding anymore. And you deserve the chance to reclaim your life, son, your friends, your school, all of it." To his surprise, Caleb didn't immediately light up at the prospect. Instead, his brow furrowed in thought. "What about you, Dad? Your career? Your reputation? Won't this hurt you too?" The question caught Elias off guard. He'd been so focused on his plan, on bringing Vanessa and Marcus to justice, that he hadn't fully considered the implications for his own future. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "There will probably be some fallout, questions about why I disappeared, about my role in all of this. But the truth is on our side. Well, weather it." Caleb nodded slowly, then stepped forward and did something that shocked Elias to his core. He hugged him tight and fierce. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Caleb mumbled into his shirt. "For standing up to them, for doing the right thing." Elias felt a lump form in his throat. He hugged his son back, marveling at how tall he'd grown, how strong he'd become. "I'm proud of you too, kiddo. More than you know." As they broke apart, Elias felt a shift in the air, as if a great weight had been lifted. The revenge that had consumed him for so long suddenly felt hollow in the face of his son's unwavering support. "Come on," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Let's get out of here for a bit. I think we both could use some fresh air." They walked in companionable silence through the streets of Portland, the crisp autumn air filling their lungs. As they reached a small park overlooking the harbor, Elias guided them to a bench. "Caleb," he began, then corrected himself. "No, I suppose it's time we went back to our real names. Caleb, I owe you an apology." The boy looked up, surprise evident in his eyes. "For what?" Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. "For dragging you into this mess. For uprooting your life. For making you live a lie. I was so focused on getting justice, no, on getting revenge, that I didn't stop to think about what it was doing to you." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the boats bobbing in the harbor. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "I won't lie, Dad. It's been hard, really hard. I miss my friends, my school. Hell, I even miss our old house sometimes." He turned to look at Elias, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I understand why you did it, and I'm glad we stuck together through all this." Elias felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You're a better man than I am, son. I let my anger consume me. I became so focused on bringing your mother and Marcus down that I lost sight of what really matters." "And what's that?" Caleb asked. "You," Elias said simply. "Our family. What's left of it, anyway. Moving forward, building something positive instead of tearing things down." Caleb nodded slowly. "So, what happens now? Do we just go back to our old lives?" Elias shook his head. "No, I don't think we can ever truly go back. Too much has changed. But we can move forward, start fresh. But this time, it's as ourselves." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun begin to set over the water. Finally, Caleb spoke again. "Dad, I know Mom and Marcus did terrible things, but is there any chance for—" "I don't know. Forgiveness? Not forgetting, but moving past it somehow?" Elias felt a flash of his old anger, but he pushed it down. "I don't know, son. That's going to take time. A lot of time. But I promise you, I'll try. For your sake, if nothing else." Caleb nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer for now. As they walked back to their apartment, Elias's mind was already racing with plans. Not for revenge this time, but for redemption, for both of them. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Elias and Caleb reclaimed their true identities, facing the inevitable media storm with a united front. There were questions, of course, accusations. But armed with the truth and a mountain of evidence, they weathered it all. Vanessa and Marcus faced the consequences of their actions. The legal proceedings were swift and merciless, their signed confessions leaving little room for leniency. As Elias watched them being led away in handcuffs, he felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of waste. But even as that chapter of their lives closed, a new one was beginning. Elias, true to his word, anonymously established a fund to compensate the junior architects whose work had been stolen. It wouldn't undo the damage done, but it was a start. Then, on a crisp Saturday morning, Elias found himself standing before a group of wide-eyed teenagers at a local community center. Caleb stood beside him, nervously shuffling a stack of papers. "Good morning, everyone," Elias began. "I'm Elias Blackwood, and this is my son Caleb. We're here today to talk to you about architecture, but more than that, we're here to talk about building. Building structures, yes, but also building lives. Building integrity." As he spoke, Elias felt warmth spread through his chest. This, he realized, was what he'd been missing. Not the thrill of revenge, but the simple joy of creating something positive. Caleb stepped forward, his initial nervousness fading as he began to explain the basics of drafting to the group. Elias watched with pride, seeing not just a son, but a young man coming into his own. As the session wound down, one of the kids raised her hand. "Mr. Blackwood," she asked, "why are you doing this? I mean, you're a famous architect. Why bother with us?" Elias exchanged a look with Caleb before answering. "Because," he said softly, "everyone deserves a chance to build something beautiful. And sometimes, the most important thing we can build is a better version of ourselves." As they packed up their supplies, Caleb bumped his shoulder against Elias's. "Nice speech, Dad," he said with a grin. "Very after-school special." Elias laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Hey, watch it. I'm still learning this whole role model thing." They stepped out into the sunlight, the future stretching before them like a blank blueprint, ready to be filled with new designs, new dreams. It wouldn't be easy, Elias knew. The scars of the past wouldn't fade overnight. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Real, genuine hope. As they walked down the street, Caleb's voice drifted up. "Hey, Dad, I'm glad we're doing this together." Elias smiled, throwing an arm around his son's shoulders. "Me too, son. Me too." And as they disappeared around the corner, the sun glinted off the windows of the surrounding buildings, as if the very city were winking at them, approving of this new blueprint they were creating, not of steel and glass, but of redemption and second chances.